There's a moment in the 5th season finale where Evil Morty walks calmly toward the edge of every Rick that has ever existed, draws a line in the sky with his finger, and steps through it. In that single quiet image, the show admits something it had been hiding for almost 100 episodes. The infinite multiverse you have been watching is not infinite at all. It is a fenced garden. Tonight on Rickar, we are going through the whole shape of it. Every Rick, every Morty, every dimension the show has ever named or hinted at. The Council, the Citadel, the Federation, the Curve, Rick Prime, the Clones, the Decoys, the Phoenix People, the Story Lords, the Beth we still are not sure about. The entire architecture of the Rick and Morty multiverse from the inside out. So get comfortable, we will be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. The first thing worth saying before any of the names and the numbers and the dimensions start piling up is that Rick and Morty is not really a show about parallel universes the way most parallel universe stories are. Most of those stories are about a single character meeting a single different version of themselves, doing a kind of mirror trick and then going home. Rick and Morty starts from a much wilder premise. Every possibility exists, every variation is real somewhere. Every choice you did not make happened 1,000,000 times over to 1,000,000 slightly different versions of you. And somewhere in there is a version that did everything right, and a version that did everything wrong, and a version where you are not even human. That premise sounds at first like a freedom, like a kind of cosmic shrug that says nothing matters, and for a long time the show plays it that way. It is loose with death, loose with families, loose with consequence, because every choice has been made by somebody. But the further the show goes, the more it sneaks up on the opposite idea. The idea that infinity, when you actually live inside it, is not freedom at all. It is paralysis. It is a quiet kind of horror. Because if every version of you exists somewhere, and one of those versions is happier, and one of them is dead, and one of them is the worst person in the world, then your particular choices stop mattering in any heroic way. You're just a sample. You're a point on a curve. Once you understand that, you understand why almost every villain in this show is, in some sense, a Rick who looked at the multiverse too long. To find the actual shape of it, you have to start with what the show calls the Central Finite Curve. The curve is not introduced until very late, until Evil Morty explains it in the 5th season finale, but it has been the silent architecture of the entire show from the beginning, and once you know about it, the early episodes look different. The idea, in plain terms, is this. There are infinite realities. Inside that infinity, there are countless versions of Rick Sanchez, and they are wildly different from each other, but they share one trait. They are the smartest being in their universe. Long before the show begins, the Ricks, collectively, drew a line around the part of the multiverse where that is true and shut the rest of it out. They called the inside the Central Finite Curve. Everything we have ever seen on screen happens inside it. Every dimension the boys visit, every alternate Beth, every alternate Jerry, every Mr. Poopy Butthole sitting at a different dinner table. All of it is inside the curve, which means very importantly that the multiverse of Rick and Morty is the part of infinity that the Ricks could tolerate, the part where they were the smartest people in the room. Outside the curve, presumably, there are infinite universes where Rick is just a guy, where Rick is dumber than his grandson, where Rick does not exist at all, where some other species evolve to be the dominant intellect, where the laws of reality bend in a way Rick cannot follow. The Ricks shut all of that out. The reason this matters, and the reason Evil Morty's speech is so devastating, is that it reframes Rick from the smartest man in existence to the smartest man in a controlled sample of existence. The genius is selection bias. The whole show is selection bias. Every Morty in the curve is, by definition, the grandson of a man whose brain is the ceiling of his entire reality. It is worth sitting with that for a second, because the show does not really explain how big the curve is, only that it is a defined subset of infinity. There are clearly thousands of branches inside it. We have seen the Citadel, where there are tens of thousands of Ricks living and working together. We have seen the Council with its handful of representative Ricks. We have seen alternate versions of the family in the simplest sitcom variations and in extreme ones. The curve is huge. It is just not everything. By quietly establishing this, the show gives itself permission to do something most multiverse stories cannot. It can talk about the multiverse and still be a story about a small, finite number of people who matter, because everything that matters is happening inside one fenced garden. Inside that garden, the dimensions are named in a way that has confused viewers since the first season. The system is not entirely consistent, but the rough shape of it is this. Each universe gets a code, usually a letter and 3 digits, that picks out its particular variation. The first one anyone learns is C-137. C-137 is where the original Rick of our show is from. By most accounts pieced together from the wiki and the later episodes, it is also the dimension where his Diane and his first Beth were killed. We have heard other codes, we have seen them on a screen behind Rick, on a portal gun readout, on a wall in the Citadel. Most of them are background detail, throwaway numbers meant to give the sense of an immense filing system. A few of them matter. The Cronenberged dimension and the dimension where Rick and Morty died at the same moment are the two that the show has spent the most time on, and they are arguably the two that shape the boys we have been watching since the start. Because here's the thing about C-137. The Rick we have been watching is from C-137. The Morty we have been watching since the 6th episode of the very first season is not. He is from a dimension fans and the wiki call the Cronenberged dimension, sometimes simply a replacement dimension, although the show has never settled on a precise code for it. The reason he is not the Morty Rick originally took on adventures is one of the most quietly horrible things this show ever did, and it happened in the first season in an episode called Rick Potion No. 9. The plot of that episode is famous now, even outside of the show's fan base, because of how completely it broke the rules of the sitcom it had been pretending to be. Rick made Morty a love potion to give to a girl at school. The potion mutated. The mutation went airborne. The airborne mutation turned every non-blood relative of Morty into, first, a creature obsessed with him, and then when Rick tried to fix it, a Cronenberg, a kind of writhing mass of teeth and limbs and skin. The whole world, every person not related to Morty by blood, Cronenberged. What Rick does next is the show's first true thesis statement, although nobody knew it at the time. Instead of fixing what he broke, instead of sitting in the consequences, instead of admitting to his family that he had destroyed civilization to help a teenager get a date, he opens a portal to a parallel reality. In that reality, an entirely different Rick had a different idea, fixed the Cronenberg problem with a different solution, and then died in his own garage along with that reality's Morty. So our Rick and our Morty walk into that garage, dig 2 graves in the backyard, bury their dead counterparts, and step into their lives. The Beth in that house, the Summer in that house, the Jerry in that house, none of them know. They keep being a family with 2 strangers wearing the faces of the people they loved. Morty, the actual 14-year-old child of the show, is left at the dinner table that night repeating to himself, in a voice that is the show's first true admission of horror, that nobody is going to come and look for them, that this is their life now, that he just has to live like nothing happened. That episode does something to the entire premise of the show that the show itself takes years to fully reckon with. It establishes in a single half hour that adventures have consequences, that families are interchangeable from Rick's point of view, that bodies can be swapped out without anybody noticing, and that Morty in particular is going to spend the rest of his life carrying the knowledge that he is in a body and a family that are not technically his. Almost every emotional beat in the next 6 seasons can be read as a long, slow processing of that one decision. Morty's silence at the dinner table, Morty's competence in a crisis, Morty's flashes of cruelty, the way he sometimes talks about himself in the third person, the way he stops crying. He buried himself in his own backyard at 14 and went inside and ate spaghetti. The implication of that swap is wider than most of the show's audience realized at the time. If Rick is willing to do it once and the show is willing to let him do it once, then anytime the family looks slightly different in a later episode, anytime a piece of furniture is in the wrong place, anytime someone says something that does not quite fit what we remember about them, the question of whether this is even the same family becomes live. The show plays with this in ways that are sometimes obvious and sometimes hidden. There is a famous beat in the 3rd season where Morty, in a quiet conversation with Summer, tells her exactly what happened, where their original family is buried and how he has lived with it. Summer is unsettled and then absorbs it. Life goes on, no big confrontation, no therapist, no undoing, just the slow normalization of a fact that should have torn that house in half. Then, in the 6th season premiere, an episode called Ricks, the show drags the consequences back to the surface. A weapon left over from a much older Rick reaches out across the multiverse and forces every portal person back to their original home dimension. Rick wakes up in C-137, the version of Earth he actually came from, with all the bodies of his original family long since gone. Morty wakes up in the Cronenberged dimension, the one he and Rick poisoned in the first season, where the Smiths are still mutated things crawling through the ruined garage. Jerry wakes up in his own original dimension, where, in a strange and pitiable touch, his life had been chugging along just fine without him. His Beth there, his kids there, nobody missing him. The episode is about getting them all home, but what it really does is confirm that all three of them have been living in borrowed lives. The Beth in the kitchen is not biologically Rick's daughter. The Morty in the back seat is not the Morty Rick first kidnapped. The Jerry in the garage is not the Jerry who first married into this. The house at the center of Rick and Morty is, and always has been, a quiet patchwork of people from other dimensions all pretending to be the original. There is a particular sadness to that, and the show, for all its noise, treats it tenderly. Morty's face in Solarix when he sees the Cronenbergs, when he understands that this is technically his Earth, that this is technically his childhood, is one of the most adult moments the character has ever had. He is not horrified, he is just quiet, he has known for a long time, he just had not been forced to look at it. To understand Rick himself, you have to go further back than the show originally let you. For the first 3 seasons, Rick's backstory was treated as a kind of teasing absence. He had a wife once, somewhere. There was a daughter we did not really know about. Sometimes a memory would flicker. There was a moment in the 3rd season premiere, in the Rickshank Rickdemption, where the Galactic Federation goes pawing through Rick's memories, and we see, in a series of flashing images, a younger Rick in a kitchen with a woman and a small child. The kitchen exploding, the woman and the child gone, and Rick swearing in front of a chalkboard to do something terrible to the version of himself who did it. The scene is played in the episode as a manipulation. Rick later claims he constructed the memory to mislead his interrogator. But the show keeps coming back to it, and by the time we are deep in the later seasons, it is clear that whatever was in that memory was real. The woman was a woman called Diane, the child was a Beth, the original Beth, and the person who killed them was another version of Rick. That other version is the one who eventually gets a name, Rick Prime. The show is careful not to overuse it because the name itself is a heavy thing. Rick Prime is not simply a more evil Rick. He is the Rick who, very early in the larger story of all the Ricks, made a particular ideological choice. He decided that family was a weakness, that attachment to one timeline was a kind of stupidity, and that the only honest thing to do with the multiverse was to use it as a hunting ground. He went from reality to reality and killed every version of his own wife and his own child, and presumably every version of himself who had chosen to stay with them, and he did it as a kind of statement of principle. He was making the point that Rick should not have a family. He was killing the version of himself who could be hurt. Our Rick, the Rick we have been watching, is the Rick who lost his Diane and his original Beth to this campaign. He is also the Rick who refused, after that, to continue being a Rick. He went looking for Rick Prime through every reality he could reach. He spent decades doing it. He arrived eventually at a dimension where another version of himself had also lost his family and had then died of a broken heart, leaving a widowed Beth and a young Morty and a sad Jerry behind. He stepped into that life. He became their grandfather. In doing so, he became the only Rick we know of, anywhere in the curve, who walked away from the hunt for Rick Prime to live with somebody else's daughter and somebody else's grandchildren. That is the secret of our Rick. He is the Rick who quit. This colors every interaction he has with Beth in the early seasons. Every time he is tender and terrified at the same time. Every time he yells at her for being like her mother. She is and is not his daughter. She is the daughter of a Rick who is dead. She has his original Beth's face. He has spent a very long time inside the multiverse trying not to look directly at her. And then he gets dragged back to the dinner table and looks at her every night. The Rick Prime storyline takes its time. It is teased for years. There are moments in the 3rd season finale where you suspect that the wider Rick mythology is building toward something. There are pieces in the 4th season, including a now famous montage of all the moments Rick has been close to catching Prime and walked away. But it is in the 6th season, in episodes like Solarix and Full Meta Jack Rick, that the show really commits to it. Rick is not, in the end, a man who is happy. He is a man who has built a substitute family and is one missing piece away from going back to the warpath. The piece is Rick Prime. In the 7th season, in the episode Unmortricken, the show finally gives Rick C-137 what he has been after. Rick Prime is killed. He is killed in a way that is brutal and unceremonious, and not in any way satisfying for our Rick. The hunt is over. The hole stays where it was. There is an interpretive argument to make here that the show has been making all along, which is that the multiverse was never the source of Rick's pain. The pain was always personal. The pain was always a man, a wife, a child, a kitchen. The multiverse was the excuse that let him not face it. Once Rick Prime is dead, Rick has to face it as just a widower, with no infinite enemy left to chase. He is not a god. He is not a special kind of grief. He is just a man whose family was killed. The show, in giving him that ending, is suggesting that all of Rick's nihilism, his bottle, his blacking out, his contempt for his son-in-law, was scaffolding around a very simple sadness he could not carry. Read that way, the entire arc of the show is about a man slowly being forced back into the size of his actual life. While all of this is going on for our particular Rick, there is a whole separate story going on around the rest of the Ricks. The Ricks are organized. They have been organized for a long time. The architecture of that organization, which the show calls in some places the Council of Ricks, and in other places the Citadel of Ricks, is one of the most interesting pieces of world building in the entire run. The Council is the smaller, older version of the institution. It is introduced in the first season in an episode called Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, where our Rick is hauled in front of a group of other Ricks who run interdimensional law enforcement. The Council, as we first meet it, is a kind of Supreme Court. It is a handful of Ricks in robes, suspicious of our Rick, contemptuous of him, accusing him of murders he did not commit. The show is having a lot of fun with the joke that even the worst people are eventually invited to a board meeting. But the Council is also doing something narratively important. It is the first signal that Rick is not unique. He is one of many. There is a bureaucracy of Ricks. They do not like him. They have rules he does not follow. They sentence each other. The episode escalates into a chase that reveals the killer is not a Morty, but an apparently rogue Rick controlling a Morty as a kind of puppet. The killer Rick is then killed, and the Morty is taken away to be returned to his rightful Rick. That is the first time we hear the phrase that becomes the show's most uncomfortable revelation. The phrase is a Morty's rightful Rick. It implies very quietly that Ricks own Mortys. It implies that there is a registry. It implies that the institution is not just a court, but a kind of supply chain. And it leaves us with a single image, the image of a child Morty, eye patch over his face, standing in a closet of Mortys waiting for the next call, who looks at the camera in a way that anyone watching for the first time files away as creepy and forgets. That is Evil Morty. We will come back to him. But the seed of the entire next decade of the show is planted in that one shot. The Council is destroyed in the third season, in the premiere episode that finally gives Rick a chance to take his revenge on every institution that has tried to control him. He kills the Council Ricks in a sequence that is half action, half satire, and the whole structure of Rick law enforcement collapses. What replaces the Council is, in a way, much bigger and much more interesting. The replacement is the Citadel. The Citadel had been there all along, a kind of city of Ricks. But with the Council gone, the Citadel becomes its own story. The Citadel of Ricks is one of the most fascinating settings the show ever built. It is a vast metropolis floating in interdimensional space, populated entirely by Ricks and Mortys. There are Rick neighborhoods. There are Morty neighborhoods. There are Morty schools where Mortys are educated. There are factories. There are police. There are sewers where outcast Ricks live with the broken Mortys nobody claimed. There is a wage gap. There is a political system. There is a candy industry. It is, in other words, a fully functioning society. And it is made up entirely of grandfathers and grandchildren. The episode that does the most work to flesh this out is in the third season, an episode called the Ricklantis Mix-Up, also known in some circles as Tales from the Citadel. It is one of the few episodes where the show genuinely steps away from the main family and tells a series of small, separate stories about Ricks and Mortys we have never met and will largely never see again. It is a slum cop drama about two Ricks on patrol. It is a coming-of-age story about a Morty in school. It is a workplace tragedy in a factory that makes the show's iconic green portal fluid. It is a political thriller about a Morty running for president of the Citadel. And every one of these stories is told in a register that the main show usually avoids. They are gentle, they are sad. They are about working-class Ricks who never got to be geniuses, about Mortys who dared to be ambitious, about the cost of pretending that 50,000 identical grandfathers can build a functioning city. The slum cop story ends in murder and cover-up. The coming-of-age story ends in a young Morty being lobotomized by the system. The factory story ends in a worker realizing that the green goo he has spent his life producing is made of the bodies of his kind. And the political story ends with the apparent triumph of a kind, idealistic candidate who, in the last seconds of the episode, is revealed to be Evil Morty himself, the same eye-patched child from the closet, smiling slightly as a piece of orchestral music plays, having just won the election to take over the whole structure. That ending is the moment the show stopped being a sketch comedy with serialized teases and started being a serialized story with a long villain. Evil Morty had been a one-episode joke. He had been a fan theory, he had been a meme, and then, in a single episode that pretends to be a side story, he becomes the president of every Rick in the multiverse. The show, very quietly, has put a Morty in charge. Evil Morty is, by some distance, the show's most carefully built character, and his arc is worth following from end to end, because it is the one running storyline that everything else in the multiverse eventually crosses. When we first see him in close Rick counters of the Rick kind, he is the puppet. He is the silent boy in the corner being controlled by a Rick who has hollowed out his head to use it as a remote. The council recovers him and the episode ends on a beat, where he is taken to a holding area to be cleaned up and returned to wherever he came from. Except in the last second, we see him alone, and we see him take off the eye patch, and we see that the boy underneath is intact, alert, and completely unafraid. The implication is that he was never the puppet at all. He was the one running the Rick. The Rick was the body. The boy was the brain. He killed his Rick in front of the council and walked away clean. This is one of those moments that the show, for a long time, refused to explain. We do not see Evil Morty again for several seasons. He is whispered about. He is teased. He is referenced in passing in the Citadel. Then, in the Ricklantis mix-up, we get the second chapter of his story. A kind, soft-spoken Morty is running for president. He gives gentle speeches, he talks about how Mortys deserve dignity. He attracts the attention of the Rick establishment who try to sabotage him. He keeps winning. He gives one final speech, full of compassion and hope, and the music swells and the camera tracks back, and we see in his office that the President Morty is the same boy from the closet, the same one who wore the eye patch, the same one who killed his Rick. He sits down at his desk. He pours himself a drink. He smiles. He plays a piece of classical music. And in the lobby of his building, his political opponents are being dragged into elevators and shot. The fourth season barely uses him. He is the president of the Citadel, but for most of that season, the Citadel is off-screen, a kind of distant rumor. The show is doing other things. The Vindicators arc, the toxic Rick arc, the exploration of Beth's identity. But in the background, Evil Morty is consolidating. By the time we come back to him in earnest, in the fifth season finale, the question is no longer whether he is a threat. The question is what he actually wants. And the answer the show gives him is the most interesting answer it could possibly give. Evil Morty does not want to be in charge of the Citadel. He does not want to become the next Rick. He does not want to take revenge on the Mortys who failed him or the Ricks who used him. What he wants is out of the Citadel, out of the politics of it, out of the whole structure of being a Morty in a world where Ricks exist. He wants to escape the Central Finite Curve itself. He wants to leave the fenced garden. He wants to go into the part of infinity where Ricks are not the smartest, where the rules do not apply, where a Morty does not, by definition, orbit a grandfather. The episode that does this is called Rickmurai Jack, and it is, by a long way, the most important world-building episode in the show's run. We get the explanation of the curve. We get the explanation of how Rick built it. We get the explanation of how Evil Morty, after years of effort, has finally engineered a way to drill through it. He blows up most of the Citadel as a distraction. He uses the explosion to fuel a kind of dimensional saw. He cuts the boundary. He steps through. And on the other side, what we see is not a war room or an army or a revenge plot. It is a quiet, ordinary, infinite expanse, with one shadowy figure walking calmly into it and the camera staying behind. He does not come back. The arc, for now, is over. He is gone into the part of reality that Ricks could not stand to see. You could argue Evil Morty is the show's first real protagonist with a coherent goal. He is the only character whose long-term project actually works. Rick is in flight from his pain. Morty is in flight from his grandfather. Beth is in flight from her father. Jerry is in flight from his own irrelevance. Summer is in flight from being underestimated. But Evil Morty wants one specific thing and does it. He wants out. He gets out. The show, in letting him win, is making a kind of confession. It is admitting that the curve, the institution, the Rick-centric multiverse is something a smart enough person would simply leave. There is also a much sadder reading of Evil Morty that the show seems to invite in its quieter moments. The flashback we get in the 5th season finale shows a Morty who once tried sincerely to be a normal Morty. We see him with his Rick, we see him hopeful, and we see his Rick in a moment of casual contempt refuse to use his technology to save the Morty's family. The implication is that Evil Morty was made, not born. He was a boy who once loved a Rick, and the Rick, like all Ricks, treated him as a sidekick. So he spent the rest of his life making sure no Rick anywhere could ever do that to a Morty again. He is the Morty who took the question of being a Morty seriously and followed it all the way through to the end. The show, by giving him this story, has done something quietly subversive to its own premise. It has admitted that the Rick perspective is not the only perspective, that a Morty can have a project, that a Morty can win, and that, in the end, the smartest thing a Morty could do is leave the Rick and never speak to him again. To talk about Evil Morty properly, you have to talk about the rest of the Mortys because his story only makes sense against theirs. The Mortys are the show's largest and least examined class. There are thousands of them. They live in the Citadel. They are educated in a particular kind of way to be useful to a Rick. The show has dropped enough fragments of this education for us to put it together. There is a song that the Mortys sing about their place in the world. There is a school where Mortys go to learn how to be good Mortys. There is a system that filters out the troublesome ones and lobotomizes them. There is a sewer where the failed Mortys end up. There is a folk story about a Morty who became a Rick. There is a whole religion built around this story. The folk story is one of the most important pieces of canon the show has, although it is buried in a side episode and rarely brought up. As far as fans have pieced it together, the story goes that there was once a Morty who broke through, who became smart enough to leave being a Morty behind, who became, in some sense, the first Morty Rick. The Mortys whisper about him. They tell their children about him. He is a kind of religious figure. The show, with characteristic mischief, leaves it ambiguous whether the story is true or whether the story is the lie that the Ricks tell the Mortys to keep them docile, to give them a hope they can never realize. It is also possible to read Evil Morty himself as the Morty in the prophecy, the one who finally broke out. The episode that introduces Evil Morty in the closet, the political campaign episode in the Citadel, and the 5th season finale where he leaves the curve can all be read as the same story being told from different angles. A boy, born a Morty, refusing to live as one. The Mortys we meet in the main show are mostly the C-137 Morty and his replacement, the Cronenberged dimension Morty. But the show has used the Morty supply as a quiet horror engine throughout its run. There are Mortys with eye patches, there are Mortys who run businesses, there are Mortys who pilot fighter jets in the Citadel's military. There are Mortys who are old, who are dying, who are bitter, who are crazy. There is one episode where Rick and Morty briefly visit a Morty who has been left alone for too long, who is talking to a coat rack as if it were a Rick, who has lost the ability to speak in any other relationship. There is another episode where we see a Morty who is missing limbs from years of being used as a kind of biological shield. The Citadel, when it shows you a Morty, almost always shows you the cost of being one. And then there are the Mortys who have escaped, the original Evil Morty. The Mortys in his administration, the Mortys who, after the 5th season finale, are left behind to figure out what life looks like without a Rick to orbit. The Citadel is destroyed at the end of Rickmurai Jack. Many Ricks die, many Mortys die, but many also escape, and what they go on to do is largely left for the show to come back to in its own time. There are hints, there are background sightings, there are jokes. There is the suggestion that some Mortys are still out there, organizing, planning, doing the slow, patient work of becoming people instead of accessories. To balance the books on the Citadel, you have to spend a little time with the Ricks who live there because they are not all the genius we have come to know. Most of the Ricks in the Citadel are not particularly impressive. They are, by the show's own admission, ordinary versions of an extraordinary man. They work in factories, they drive taxis, They pour drinks at bars. They sweep floors. They have all the contempt and the cynicism and the casual cruelty of our Rick, without any of the powers that make those traits funny. They are, in a strange way, the saddest characters in the show. They are men who tried to be the smartest man in the universe and ended up flipping burgers in a city of their own copies. They are the punchline of the joke that being Rick Sanchez is supposed to mean something. They prove it does not, on average, mean very much at all. The Citadel also gives us the show's most direct look at what Rick is like in groups. The council Ricks are pompous and procedural, the factory Ricks are exhausted, the political Ricks are corrupt, the criminal Ricks are mean. There is no scene in the Citadel where Ricks treat each other kindly. There is no Rick we meet there who's anyone's friend. The implication, again subtle but consistent, is that Rick is a person who cannot share a city with himself. Put two Ricks in a room and they will end up trying to outwit each other within minutes. Put 50,000 of them in a city and you end up with a kind of slow-motion civil war, kept stable only by the labor of a slave class of grandchildren. The Citadel is destroyed, as already noted in Rickmurai Jack. The destruction is total. The economy collapses because the economy was made of Ricks. The Morty supply collapses because the suppliers were the Ricks. In the aftermath, you would think the multiverse would feel emptier. In some ways it does, but in other ways the loss of the Citadel frees up a lot of narrative room for the show to focus on a smaller, more intimate cast. After Rickmurai Jack, the show is no longer about an institution, it is about a family. The family it is about is the one in the house in the suburbs. That family deserves its own chapter, because the Smith household is, in a strange way, the truest dimension in the entire multiverse. It is the dimension that the show keeps coming back to, even after burning down most of its larger settings. It is the dimension that holds the center when everything else is unstable. The Beth, the Jerry, the Summer, the Morty, and the Rick at that dinner table are, by the end of the 7th season, almost the only stable characters left. Everything else has been destroyed, sealed off, abandoned, or written out. The dinner table remains. And yet the dinner table itself is a quiet, ongoing puzzle. Because we know from Solarix that the family Rick lives with is not the family he is biologically related to. We know from Rick Potion number 9 that the Morty is not the original. We know from Solarix again that the Jerry is not even from the same Earth as the rest of them. We know that the Summer at the table is the daughter of a Jerry from another dimension, and a Beth Rick walked into the kitchen of. So who is sitting at that table, really? In what sense are they a family? The answer the show keeps giving, with increasing patience as the seasons go on, is that they are a family because they keep showing up. The biology has been broken, the continuity has been broken, the dimensions have been swapped, and every night they still pass the salt. That is, in some ways, the show's quietest and most generous statement. It is suggesting, against everything its own multiverse has set up, that family is not a fact about biology. It is a habit. It is a pattern. It is the people you keep sitting down with after dinner has gone cold. The multiverse, with all of its terrors, has not been able to break that habit out of Rick. He sits at the table every night. He may not be at the head of the table, but he is at the table. The question of Beth, though, is more complicated than even the question of Rick or Morty, because Beth as a character has been doubled at least once in a way that the show has never fully unwound. The doubling happens in the 3rd season finale, in an episode called The Rickmurai Morty Date. Beth is having a kind of existential crisis. She wonders whether she should have left, whether she should have traveled, whether the life she has is the one she wanted. Rick offers her a solution that is uniquely his. He offers to make a clone of her, identical down to the memory, indistinguishable from the original even to herself, and send one version of her off into space to live the life she dreams of, while leaving the other version at home with her family. He tells her that he can do this and that, importantly, neither she nor he will know which one is which once the process is done. The randomness is part of the deal. The original Beth and the clone Beth become, by design, impossible to distinguish. The episode ends without telling us whether she takes the offer. It is left as a question hanging over the entire 4th season. And the 4th season finale, an episode called Star Mort Rickturn of the Jerry, eventually answers it, but in a way that opens up more questions than it closes. We discover that there are now 2 Beths. One has been at home with the family the whole time. The other has been off in space, leading a kind of resistance against the Galactic Federation, evolving into a hardened, scarred, dangerous woman who calls herself Space Beth. The 2 of them meet. They are by every measurable standard the same person, they argue, they reconcile. The show, instead of resolving the question of which one is the original, simply says that both of them are. The implication of this is worth paying attention to, because it tells us something about how the show thinks about identity. The Beth at home is not less real for not having gone to space. The Beth in space is not less real for having abandoned her family. They are both her. They are the same choice, played out in two directions. In the rest of the show, after Space Beth comes back, both of them stay. Both of them are at the table sometimes. Both of them sleep with Jerry. Both of them argue with Rick. The Smiths become very quietly a 5-person household in some episodes and a 6-person household in others. And the show plays this in a low-key way, as if to suggest that the difference is not important. There is an interpretive line you can run through this, which is that Beth, of all of the family, is the most multiverse native character. She is the daughter of a man who lives in many dimensions at once. She has been adjacent to alternate selves and alternate Mortys and alternate everythings for her whole adult life. It makes a kind of sense that she would in the end become more than one of herself and accept it. She has been thinking in multiples for so long that being two of her is just a slightly more honest representation of who she always was. Space Beth is a fascinating character in her own right because she shows us what a Beth who actually got out of the suburbs looks like. She is, by the time we meet her, a kind of guerrilla commander. She has fought the Federation, she has lost people, she has made compromises, she has the kind of moral confidence Rick pretends to have but does not really possess. When she sits down at the dinner table with Home Beth, the two of them are not exactly friends, they are sisters, they are mirrors. They are the same woman looking at the version of herself who made the opposite choice and trying not to feel either jealousy or pity. It is one of the show's most tender, most awkward, most quietly observed dynamics. Jerry's relationship with both Beths is, predictably, the source of a lot of the show's later sitcom humor. He sleeps with both of them. He tries to keep them happy. He fails, often. But there is a sweetness to it too, because the joke is that Jerry, for all his many flaws, is the only person at the table who is straightforwardly thrilled to have two Beths in his life. He is not threatened by it. He is not destabilized by it. He just loves them both. And that is, in its own quiet way, the show's most generous statement about Jerry, who is otherwise treated as a kind of cosmic embarrassment. Jerry himself is, of course, also doubled across dimensions, although the show treats his variations more comedically. There is an interdimensional Jerry daycare introduced in a 3rd season episode, where Ricks across the multiverse drop off their Jerrys to be entertained in a safe environment while they do their adventures. The daycare is staffed by a Rick. The Jerrys do crafts, they watch television, they eat ice cream. It is the saddest place in the multiverse, and it is also one of the funniest things the show has ever done, because it captures the joke that across infinite realities, Jerry is more or less the same. He needs to be looked after, he is harmless, he is universal, he is, in the end, the constant. Summer's multiverse story is quieter but real. We see versions of Summer who have gone different ways. There is a Summer in the Citadel canon who is not really her. There are versions of Summer who have died, mostly off-screen. There are versions of Summer who have taken on a much more central role than our Summer ever has. In the main timeline, Summer is increasingly given moments that suggest she could have been a protagonist of a different show if Rick had chosen her as his sidekick instead of Morty. She is sharper than Morty, more ruthless, less afraid. There are episodes where Rick takes her on adventures, and the dynamic is wildly different. Because she does not need to be protected, she needs to be enabled. The show, perhaps wisely, has resisted making her the main grandchild because the point of Rick choosing Morty is that he chose the easier child to control. Summer would have walked away years ago. The Morty does not. That is, in some ways, what makes Morty the more tragic character. The other strand of the Smith household that deserves attention is the way the entire show treats the question of dimensional replacement. Once you accept that the Rick and the Morty in the garage are from different dimensions, you have to start asking who else might have been replaced. There are episodes that play with this. There is a moment in the 6th season in an episode called Final Dismissation, where Jerry is told by an interdimensional bureaucracy that he is fated to sleep with his own mother, and the resolution of that episode tinkers with identity in ways that the show does not fully follow up on. There is a long-running joke about Mr. Poopy Butthole, a character introduced in the 2nd season in the episode Total Recall, who is revealed at the end of that episode to have been with the family the whole time and only forgotten because of an alien telepathic infection. Mr. Poopy Butthole is technically a member of the family across the entire run of the show. He has just been edited out of our memory. Total Recall is one of the show's strangest and most useful episodes for understanding how it thinks about continuity. The plot is that the house is infiltrated by alien parasites whose presence creates false, happy memories. The family wakes up surrounded by friends and relatives they all distinctly remember but who do not really exist. The trick the family uses to identify the parasites is that real memories include unpleasant moments, while parasite memories are all positive. By the end, they have shot most of the imposters and discovered that Mr. Poopy Butthole, who they were about to kill, is real, because they all have bad memories of him too. The episode is played for comedy, but the implication is that the family's memories are unreliable, that whole people can be added or removed from their lives at will, and that the only test of someone's reality is whether you have ever been disappointed by them. The Metaphors is doing a lot of work. Most of the show's quieter horror is hidden in episodes like that. This brings us eventually to one of the show's most patient and unexpected long-term plotlines, the story of Birdperson. Birdperson is introduced in the first season in the episode Rixie Business as Rick's oldest friend. He is a bird humanoid, calm, warm, hard to faze, with a particular dignity that nobody else in Rick's social circle has. He speaks in a measured, almost ceremonial way. He calls Rick by his full name. He calls Morty by his full name. He treats them both with a respect that no one else extends. The implication from his first scene is that Birdperson knew Rick before Rick was the man we know now. He knew him during the war he sometimes references. He knew him when he was something other than a drunken nihilist in a suburban garage. He is the last witness to who Rick used to be. Birdperson's relationship with Rick is the closest thing to a romantic relationship Rick has in the show, although the show is careful never to call it that. There are scenes where they sit together in silence. There are scenes where Birdperson refers to himself as the brother of Rick. There are scenes where Birdperson explains Rick to Morty in a way that suggests Birdperson understands Rick better than anyone alive. He is the friend who carries the older history. He is the man who knew the soldier. In the second season finale, an episode called The Wedding Squanchers, Birdperson marries a young human woman named Tammy. The wedding is interrupted dramatically by the revelation that Tammy is an undercover agent for the Galactic Federation, that she has been spying on Birdperson for years to get to Rick, and that the entire wedding is a trap. The Federation arrives, Birdperson is shot, the family flees. Rick, in the final beat of the episode, turns himself in to save them and is taken to a Federation prison. It is one of the show's most devastating cliffhangers, and it sets up the third season premiere as a kind of reset of everything that had come before. Birdperson is not gone, though. He returns in the third season premiere, although in a way that is closer to a horror movie than a reunion. The Federation, having recovered his body, turns him into Phoenixperson, a kind of cybernetic killing machine, all wires and weapons, his old self locked somewhere inside. He attacks Rick in the final scene. The implication is that he is being controlled, that the man he was is gone, that the friend Rick had is now a corpse with guns in it. Phoenixperson is one of the show's most unsettling images because of how much love the audience had built up for the original. He returns once more in the sixth season in an episode called Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort. Rick, with Morty's help, enters Birdperson's mind and finds him still alive, buried in his own memories, frozen at the worst moments of his life. The episode is about Rick trying to bring him back, to walk him out of his own grief, to remind him of what he was. The way the show handles the inside of Birdperson's mind is one of its most beautiful pieces of animation. Memories laid out like rooms, painful moments turning the color palette darker. Rick, faced with a version of his oldest friend who has lost the will to come back, having to do something he is not very good at, which is be the kind of presence that another person can lean on. He succeeds, more or less. Birdperson comes back. He is broken, but he is alive. The friendship survives, although changed forever. Tammy, meanwhile, is one of the show's most interesting villains because she does not feel like a villain at first. She feels like a girlfriend. She is friendly. She is sweet. She likes Birdperson. She likes the family. The show plays her deliberately as a kind of teenage romantic interest in the early seasons, and then reveals that the whole performance has been operational. She has been a Federation officer the entire time. The age she presents as, the personality she presents, the relationship she has cultivated with Birdperson, all of it is a kind of long undercover operation. By the time she is unmasked, she has been embedded for years. There is a moment in the third season where Tammy and Birdperson have a child together, although the show handles this delicately. The child is implied, not shown, in any clear way during the main run, and the show plays the implication for both horror and absurdity. The Federation has been breeding agents from the relationships it engineers. The agents grow up in service. They become operatives like their mothers. The horror is that even Birdperson, the man who knew Rick before everything went bad, has been used by the Federation as raw material for a generational scheme. He is not just a target, he is a source. His body has been weaponized, his mind has been weaponized, and now his bloodline has been weaponized. The only person who can actually go in and save any of it is Rick. The Birdperson arc is one of the most patient and emotional things the show ever did. It runs across many seasons. It is dropped, picked up, dropped again, picked up again. It is never the main story, but it is always there in the background, doing the work of grounding Rick in a past he does not want to look at directly. By the end of the 7th season, Birdperson is back, more or less. He is not the man he was. But he is something, and he is at the edge of Rick's life again. And that is more than Rick has any right to ask for. The Galactic Federation is, in many ways, the show's largest political entity, the institutional villain that hangs over multiple seasons before being humiliated and partly rebuilt. The Federation is a multi-species bureaucracy that runs vast swathes of the universe, with its own currency, its own laws, its own military, its own propaganda. It is run at the top by a class of bird-headed bureaucrats who look like every science fiction caricature of a fascist regime, and who behave in the way that any large bureaucracy behaves, which is by paperwork. Rick despises them. They despise him back. He is one of the few people in the multiverse who is on their most wanted list. He has the highest level of bounty on his head. He has been a thorn in their side for what they call decades, although Rick's timeline is so messy that decades is more of a feeling than a measurement. The Federation arrives properly in the 2nd season finale when they take Rick into custody. The 3rd season premiere, an episode called The Rickshank Rickdemption, is in some ways the most important episode in the show's first 3 seasons because of how completely it changes the status quo. Rick is interrogated by a chair that can read his memories. He uses the interrogation against the interrogator, escaping his own head, jumping his consciousness into a Federation officer, and orchestrating, from inside the Federation itself, a complete collapse of their currency. He brings down the Galactic Federation by making their money worthless overnight. The whole structure of the Empire dissolves in the span of an episode. It is one of the most audacious narrative pivots the show has ever pulled off. And it is the moment when the audience first realized that the show was willing to actually change things, that it would not preserve a status quo just because viewers were comfortable with it. But the Federation is not gone, only damaged. It rebuilds in slower and quieter forms over the seasons that follow. By the time we meet Space Beth, the Federation is back, although in a much smaller, much meaner form, more like a remnant army than an empire. Tammy is still in their service. There are still operations, there are still officers. The Federation, in its diminished state, becomes the kind of antagonist that no longer threatens the family at home, but that always looms over the larger scale stories. They are the institution that does not fully die. The Federation's role in the show is broadly to represent the kind of authority that Rick despises in all its forms. They are bureaucracy. They are uniformity. They are the polite version of the thing Rick himself is the nasty version of. Rick objects to being told what to do. The Federation tells everybody what to do. Rick objects to being measured. The Federation measures everything. There is a reading of Rick's politics, if you can call them that, as essentially anarchic. And the Federation is the perfect foil for that, because they are the empire of consequences. They are what happens when you try to bring infinite people under one set of rules. And Rick, who has spent his life dodging rules, is exactly the kind of person they cannot tolerate. There's also a reading of the Federation that goes the other way, that points out that Rick himself, in his own way, behaves like a small empire. He has his own money. He has his own currency in the form of his concentrated dark matter and the green portal fluid. He has his own jurisdiction, which is wherever he points his portal gun. He has his own little tyranny in his garage over his family. The show is not blind to this. There is a moment in the 3rd season in the episode The Rickmurai Morty Date, where the President of the United States tries to coerce Rick into doing missions for him. and Rick refuses, and the two of them have a kind of slow-motion turf war for the rest of the episode. Rick wins, but the way the episode is structured invites us to see the two of them as more alike than not. Two men who think they are above the rules, who treat their loved ones as resources, who behave as if their genius justifies whatever they want. The Federation, the President, Rick himself are all variations on the same theme, which is the man who decides he is bigger than the institution. The show is, in the end, suspicious of all of them. The Vindicators arc, which the show returns to in different shapes, is one of its most pointed satires of superhero culture. The Vindicators are a team of intergalactic heroes, modeled, with the show's usual lack of subtlety, on a particular group of comic book characters that everybody knows. They are Vance Maximus, the alcoholic leader. They are Supernova, the woman with star powers. They are Million Ants, who is a swarm of ants given form. They are Crocubot, who is a half-crocodile, half-robot. They are Alan Rails, a man who can summon ghost trains. Morty loves them. Morty has merchandise of them. They are, for Morty, the most exciting people in the universe. The show takes great pleasure in showing us in their first appearance that they are useless without Rick, that the heroism they perform is mostly theater, and that the real work of saving the universe is being done, off-camera, by the kind of cynical genius Rick represents. In the episode Vindicators 3, the team gathers to take on World Ender, a villain so dangerous that they have called Rick in for help. Rick gets drunk and in his blackout state sets up an elaborate trap that, when the team wakes up the next day, kills most of them one by one over the course of the episode. The point of the episode is not that Rick is more capable than the heroes. The point is that Rick has so little respect for them that he can dismantle them in his sleep. By the end of the episode, most of the team is dead. Vance Maximus has died of arrogance. Supernova has betrayed and killed her teammates. Alan Rails has gone out in a kind of misguided sacrifice. Only a few survive. And the show, with its usual nasty efficiency, has made the point that the multiverse is full of supposed heroes who are mostly playing at heroism, while the real moral weight of the show sits on the shoulders of an old man who hates himself. The Vindicators return in later seasons in smaller ways. Supernova, in particular, comes back as a recurring villain. There is a quietly funny long-term thread about her relationship with Rick, the ways she has tried to take revenge, the ways she has been outmaneuvered. The Vindicators as a team, though, are not really an ongoing entity. They are a 1.5-time joke, and the joke is that superhero teams are a kind of social club for people who have not done the harder work of actually living. Alongside the Vindicators, there is a wider cast of one-off and recurring villains who deserve their own discussion because they fill in the texture of the multiverse. There is the Devil, a kind of cosmic shopkeeper introduced in the first season in the episode Something Rick This Way Comes, who sells cursed objects to anybody who walks into his shop. There is Mr. Needful, the alias under which he operates. There is the recurring appearance of various supernatural entities in the show that Rick treats as ordinary problems. There is the Krombopulos Michael class of assassin character, hired guns who turn up to do violence and then are dispatched casually. Krombopulos Michael himself is an alien hitman whose enthusiasm for his work makes him one of the show's most quietly disturbing comic creations, and who is killed in the second season episode Morty Night Run. There are also the giants in the sky, the creatures that occupied the cloud world Morty fell into in that same episode. The Fart, the gaseous being that sang opera, the Zagarians, alien conmen who appear in the first season, the Gromflamites, the species that staffs the Federation army, the Cromulons, the giant heads that demand entertainment from planets, the Concerto, a music-themed villain who attacks with a piano. The show fills the multiverse with creatures that are absurd and specific, and most of them appear once and never again. The cumulative effect is a sense that the universe of Rick and Morty is densely populated, that whichever direction you point a portal gun, you will hit somebody with a problem and a backstory. A specific category of recurring antagonist deserves attention because it is the category the show keeps coming back to, and that is the Rick from elsewhere. Beyond Rick Prime, beyond the Council, beyond the Citadel, there are individual rogue Ricks who turn up to cause problems on their own. There is Toxic Rick, who is introduced in the third season episode Rest and Ricklaxation, the dimension of Rick made of all the bad parts of him after the toxin removal process. There is Memory Rick, introduced in the fourth season episode Morty's Mindblowers, the man who lives inside Rick's mind keeping track of erased memories. There is Doofus Rick, the friendly Rick from a dimension where everything is slightly worse, who befriends Jerry. There is the Tiny Rick episode in the second season in which Rick puts his consciousness into a teenage body and almost loses himself in it. There are Ricks who appear briefly in the Citadel, Ricks who appear in the Council, Ricks who appear in flashbacks. Every Rick on screen is a variation. Every Rick is a sketch of what the central Rick could become. The recurring rotating supporting cast of Earthbound human characters deserves their own paragraph too, because they keep showing up at the edges of the show in ways that anchor it to the suburban setting. There is Mr. Goldenfold, Morty's math teacher, who is repeatedly drawn into the family's adventures and is repeatedly traumatized by them. There is Principal Vagina, whose name is one of the show's longest running and stupidest jokes, and who occasionally takes on a bigger role. There is Jessica, Morty's longtime crush, who at one point becomes a kind of time witch in a way that the show treats casually. There is the Smith family's various pets and incidental friends, including Snowball the dog, who, in the second episode of the first season, Lawnmower Dog, briefly leads a canine revolution after Rick boosts his intelligence. There is the cat from a fourth season episode whose backstory is so horrifying that Rick erases his own memory of it rather than tell Morty. And again, Mr. Poopy Butthole, whose entire existence is played as a soft horror. These edge characters are part of what makes the show feel populated. The multiverse is not just dimensions, it is also a quiet, ongoing rhythm of supporting cast members who keep turning up, who keep being affected by the Smiths' chaos, who keep having to absorb the consequences of being in the wrong neighborhood. None of them are the main story. All of them are evidence that the main story is happening to somebody. A particular subset of episodes operates at a more metafictional level, and these episodes are worth treating as a category, because they are doing something the show has been slowly building toward from the beginning. The most famous of them is in the fourth season, an episode called Never Ricking Morty. The plot of Never Ricking Morty is, on its surface, simple. Rick and Morty are trapped on a train. The train is moving through a sequence of carriages, each carriage containing a story being told about Rick and Morty. The villain of the episode is a being called the Story Lord, who feeds on narrative, who can only exist if there is a story to inhabit, who needs Rick and Morty to engage with the story in order to give him power. The way Rick and Morty escape is by refusing to engage. They refuse to have stakes, they refuse to care about what happens, they refuse to give the story what it wants, and in doing so, they shrink the Story Lord into nothing. The episode is, in some ways, the show's most direct commentary on its own existence. It is making the argument that the multiverse, the family, the adventures, the consequences are all variations on a single narrative pattern, and that the pattern only has power if the audience and the characters take it seriously. By having Rick and Morty refuse the pattern, the show is doing two things at once. It is undermining itself, and it is showing how its own structure works. The Story Lord is the show. The train is the show. The carriages are the episodes. And the refusal to engage is the show's quiet acknowledgement that, on some level, the whole multiverse is a structure of stories that the characters are aware of and trapped in. This kind of metafictional argument runs through other episodes too. There is the Vat of Acid episode in the fourth season, in which Rick gives Morty a device that allows him to live alternate timelines, then collapse back to the original at any moment. Morty uses it to live what seems like a long, full life, including a romance, a family, and an eventual realization that he is the only person who remembers any of it. He collapses back. Rick reveals that the device worked differently than Morty thought, that the lives he lived were real, that there are real people he has now abandoned in the timelines he closed. Morty is devastated. The episode is about the consequences of treating life as a save and reload mechanism, and it is, in a quieter way, about the kind of cruelty Rick performs on a daily basis by using the multiverse as a sandbox. There is Mortyplicity in the fifth season, which is about the Decoy family. Rick has been making decoy versions of the Smiths for years, sending them out to take attacks meant for the real family. The Decoys have been operating throughout the show's history without anybody knowing. When an alien hit squad targets the family, the Decoys spring into action. But the Decoys themselves have decoys, and those decoys have decoys. The episode spirals into an increasingly absurd series of nested copies, each Smith family thinking they are the real one, each of them being killed in turn, each of them realizing at the moment of death that they were a copy. The episode ends with a kind of nihilistic punchline. By the end, you do not know if the Smiths sitting in the living room are the real Smiths. You do not know if there are any real Smiths left. You do not know if it matters. Multiplicity is doing something very important for the show's larger multiverse logic. It is establishing that the family itself has been multiplied many times over for safety reasons, that there is no longer a meaningful original even within their own dimension, that the household is itself a recursive joke. It is also, in a way that the show does not push too hard, a quiet portrait of how Rick treats his own family. He has built them as a fortress. He has built copies of them to die in their place. He has not told them. They have lived their whole lives unaware of how many times they have already been killed somewhere else in the same house. The decoy plotline becomes important again later, especially in the 7th season, where a particular decoy storyline turns into a long-running thread about which Smiths are real. The implications are not fully resolved. The show keeps it ambiguous on purpose. By the end of the 7th season, the question of whether the family at the table is in any sense the original family is essentially unanswerable. They are a family because they think they are. The biology has been swapped out twice. The decoys have been swapped in and out. The dimensions have been hopped. The household persists in a kind of identity that does not depend on any one of those continuities. There is something almost peaceful about this in the later seasons. The show has spent so much time interrogating the idea of identity that it has worn the question out. By the 7th season, when characters argue about whether they are real, the answer they keep landing on is that the argument itself is irrelevant. They are who they are. They are doing what they are doing. The original is gone. The original was never that important to begin with. Mr. Nimbus, who first appears in the 5th season premiere, is a useful example of how the show uses its long form to make jokes that pay off across episodes. Mr. Nimbus is, according to himself, the king of the ocean. He is the only being in the multiverse who can command water. He is also, according to Rick, an idiot, who Rick has been forced to keep on side because of an old treaty. He turns up at the family's house in formal attire. He talks about the police as an enemy. He has slept, at one point or another, with both Beth and Jerry, although the way the show plays this is more bawdy than serious. He is one of the most ridiculous regular characters in the show, and his ridiculousness is, in a way, part of his point. He is a reminder that the multiverse is not all desperate philosophy. Sometimes it's also a guy with a trident and a chest plate who is sleeping with your wife. Throughout the show, there is a strand of this kind of comic world building. Mr. Nimbus is one example. The President of the United States is another. The recurring appearances of Hemorrhage, the post-apocalyptic warrior Summer, dates in a 2nd season episode is another. The show takes care to give itself a steady supply of large personalities to walk into and out of the suburban story, each of them bringing a different color. The cumulative effect is a multiverse that feels lived in, where every walk down a street might produce a deeply weird stranger who insists they have a relationship with you. The interdimensional cable episodes, of which there are 2 in the first 2 seasons, deserve a specific mention, because they are the show's most direct and most beloved way of reminding the audience how absurd the multiverse can be. In Rick's Minutes in the 1st season and Interdimensional Cable 2 in the 2nd season, Rick rewires the family's television to show channels from every reality in the multiverse, and we spend long stretches of the episodes watching commercials and shows that exist only in alternate Earths. There are mock films, there are mock news bulletins, there are mock celebrity profiles. The bits are written and improvised in a way that has become iconic, and they are doing real world building work too. Each one of these throwaway clips is a window into a separate reality where culture went a different way. The implication is that every dimension has its own television. The implication is that there are infinite commercials for products that exist nowhere else. The implication is that the multiverse is, more than anything, a vast generator of human noise. Within those interdimensional cable episodes, there is also the show's most painful Jerry and Beth subplot, in which Beth uses one of Rick's devices to look at the lives of all her alternate selves and discovers, with horror, that in almost every reality, the version of her that did not get pregnant by Jerry at 17 went on to a more successful life. Jerry, meanwhile, discovers, with equal horror, that in many realities where Beth left him, he ended up as a successful actor. The two of them are confronted in one episode with the entire alternate history of their non-choices, and they have to make a decision about whether to keep being married. They keep being married. The reason they give, in the end, is essentially that the lives the alternates have do not look any happier than theirs, just different. That is one of the show's gentlest, most adult moments. It is also a clean statement of the multiverse's thesis. Other lives are not better, only other. The The show's relationship with its own production history is unusual, and the multiverse has had to absorb a real-world event of unusual size in the form of the change in voice cast that happened ahead of the 7th season. The publicly available facts are these. Justin Roiland, who co-created the show, who voiced both Rick and Morty for the first 6 seasons, was publicly accused in early 2023 of offenses relating to a former partner. The charges, which had been filed earlier, were later dropped. The studio that produces Rick and Morty cut ties with him before the legal process had concluded on its own internal grounds. He is no longer involved in the show. He no longer voices the characters. The show recast the roles for the 7th season. The new voice of Rick is the actor Ian Cardoni. The new voice of Morty is the actor Harry Belden. These are documented facts that the show itself has acknowledged. What the multiverse fiction of the show has done with this change is interesting. The 7th season premieres without ceremony. There is no in-show explanation. The voices change. The audience is expected to adjust. The multiverse logic of the show absorbs the change because it has to. Some fans treat it as a soft recasting, the kind of thing that happens in long-running animated shows when a voice actor moves on. Some fans treat it as a kind of dimension hop, as if the Rick and Morty we are watching are now slightly different versions of themselves. The show does not endorse either reading, it just continues. The fact that it can continue, that Rick can keep being Rick, and Morty can keep being Morty with different voices, is itself a quiet confirmation of the show's thesis that identity is more about pattern than about particular details. The voice changes, the character persists, the household persists. Even the actors are, in some sense, dimensional hops. There is something worth noting carefully here. The show has not tried to use the multiverse to make light of the real-world events. There is no in-show joke about Justin Roiland. There is no plot about a Rick being replaced for misconduct. The 7th season simply moves on. The choice not to comment is, in its own way, a choice. The studio, the writers, the producers, the cast have decided that the right response to a real-world event of this kind is silence in the fiction. The fiction continues to be the fiction. Anything else would be tasteless. The audience is left to do their own reckoning, and the multiverse remains, as it always has been, a place that does not need to answer for what its own creator did. Coming back to the specifically named dimensions, because the show has built up a small but meaningful inventory of them, it is worth walking through the ones the audience has spent enough time in to call them real places. The first is the original C-137, the dimension our Rick belongs to, where his Diane and his first Beth died, and where he can no longer really live. This dimension has been visited briefly in flashback and more substantially in the events of Solarix, when Rick is forced back into it by the portal weapon. What we see of it is a kitchen, a garage, a memorial to a dead family, and a man who has been alone in his original house for a very long time with all the lights off. It is one of the few places the show treats as sacred, in the negative sense. It is the place Rick refuses to go back to. The second is the Cronenberged dimension, Morty's actual dimension, which we visit briefly in the first season after the love potion catastrophe and again in Solarix. The state of that Earth is essentially post-apocalyptic. The Smith family of that dimension, mutated into Cronenbergs, are still wandering the suburbs. The civilization that once existed has collapsed into wet, terrible biology. The show, when it returns to that dimension, plays it with a kind of gallows quiet. Morty's actual childhood home is here, and the parents and the sister he was technically born to are now things that crawl. The Solarix return to this dimension is one of the most emotionally complicated moments in the entire show, because Morty, faced with the dimension he came from, recognizes it and accepts that he has to leave it again. He cannot fix it. He cannot live in it. He cannot save the family that was his. He goes back to the household he has been pretending into for years, and that household, for all its broken biology, is the one that feels like his. The third dimension worth naming is the one our Rick and Morty replaced themselves into in the first season, the dimension where another Rick and another Morty had just died. This dimension is the one that, on the surface, looks identical to home. The Beth in this dimension is the one our Rick now treats as his daughter. The Summer is the one our Rick now treats as his older granddaughter. The Jerry, before Solarix dragged him out, was the one our Rick has mostly mocked. This dimension, the dimension the audience has been spending almost all of its time in for many seasons, was never properly named in the show. The wiki calls it by various tags. The show calls it by no name. It is just home. And the lack of a name is, in a way, a quiet acknowledgement that this is, for all practical purposes, the dimension. It is where the camera lives. A fourth dimension to mention, although the show treats it as a kind of joke, is Anatomy Park. Anatomy Park is not strictly a dimension. It is a theme park built inside the body of a homeless man named Ruben in the first season episode of the same name. The episode is, in its own way, a beautiful piece of writing. Rick has built, over years, an entire functioning theme park inside one body, with rides and zones and corporate sponsors. The premise is absurd. The execution is heartbreaking. Ruben dies. Anatomy Park ends up floating in space, expanding into a kind of vast, organic theme park in the void. It is the show's first and most expansive joke about the scale at which Rick operates. He can build a theme park inside a man he chooses to. He does not even charge admission. The Pickle Rick episode in the third season is famous for its own reasons, but in terms of the multiverse, it does little expansion. It is instead a kind of character study. Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy. The episode is, in its quieter beats, about avoidance, about Rick's refusal to do the work of being a person, about the family's slow realization that no amount of bending will make Rick participate in the work of being part of a household. The therapy scenes, in particular, are some of the most direct writing the show has ever done about Rick's psychology. The therapist, in a scene that has become legendary among fans, tells the family that the work of being alive is repetitive and boring and that some people refuse to do it. She says it without judgment. She is talking about Rick. She is also, by implication, talking about the show itself, which has used the multiverse for many seasons as a way of avoiding the harder, smaller work of being on Earth. The third season also contains the Rickmurai Morty date, which contains the dimension-hopping subplot that ends with Beth being cloned and which sets up the entire fourth season's central uncertainty. The President of the United States in this episode is a key recurring character. He represents earthly power in its most petty form, and his ongoing relationship with Rick is one of the show's most enjoyably stupid jokes. He turns up in later episodes, including in the seventh season's Air Force Wong, in which he is operating outside official channels and is, in a strange way, the only authority figure who is on Rick's side. The president is a kind of comic counterweight to all the other authorities Rick has dealt with. He is the human, terrestrial, small-minded power, the joke being that even in a multiverse with infinite dimensions, the leader of one ordinary country can still cause a man like Rick a headache. The fourth season is, in a way, the most experimental season the show has done. It contains Edge of Morty, in which Rick gives Morty a kind of save and reload device that he uses to live multiple lives. It contains The Old Man and the Seat, a tender and absurd episode about Rick's secret bathroom on a private planet. It contains Claw and Hoarder, the episode about the cat with the horrifying backstory. It contains Rattlestar Ricklactica, a quiet episode about a snake civilization that develops time travel. It contains Never Ricking Morty. It contains Promortius, an episode about facehuggers and bodily autonomy. It contains the Vat of Acid episode. It contains Childrick of Mort, about Rick's sudden discovery that he is the father of a planet's worth of soil children. It contains Star Mort Rickturn of the Jerry. Promortius deserves a separate mention for what it does to the show's relationship with the multiverse. The episode is, on its surface, a body horror joke. Rick and Morty wake up on an alien planet covered in facehugger-style creatures and have to fight their way out. And at the end of the episode, we discover that the dimension they have been escaping from is in fact a part of a larger ongoing story they did not know they were in. The episode is structured so that what looks like a complete adventure turns out to be a fragment of a much longer narrative, and the implication is that there are dozens of these fragments happening at the edges of the show's continuity that we will never see. The multiverse is bigger than what the camera shows. We have always been on the edge of stories the show does not have time to tell. The fifth season's Mortyplicity has already been discussed, but it is worth circling back to because it is the episode that most aggressively redefines what the household even is. Up to that episode, you could believe that the Smith family at the dinner table were the Smith family. After that episode, you cannot. You know that there have been many Smith families. You know that they have been killed and replaced. You know that the Smiths sitting in the living room at the end of any given episode may or may not be the ones we started with. The show, in delivering this episode, makes a quiet but permanent change to how it can be watched. From then on, every episode is also, secretly, a question about whose body is on the couch. The 5th season also contains a Rick convenient Mort, in which Morty falls in love with a woman who turns out to be a climate vigilante destroying planets to save the universe. It contains Unmortricken Grickfitty, in which the space cruiser is given a chance to behave like a teenager and gets into a kind of car bonding scene. It contains Gotron Jerisis Rickvangelion, in which Jerry, of all people, becomes a master of giant robots and saves the day, only for the resolution to be a kind of soft, sad reminder that Jerry's competence is always taken back by the end of an episode. The 5th season is doing a lot of experimental work, and a lot of it is about giving the supporting cast moments of dignity they do not normally get. The 6th season is, in many ways, the season that returns the show to the question of Rick himself. After the Citadel arc concludes, the show seems to need a new central focus, and it finds it by returning, in a more sustained way, to Rick's interior. Bethic Twinstinct in the 6th season is about Beth and space. Beth having a romantic affair with each other, which is one of the most strange and quietly affecting things the show has done with the doubled Beth concept, in which the show plays without much shock value, treating it as a logical extension of the fact that they are both her. Final Desmithation, also in the 6th season, plays with destiny. Jurixic Mort plays with dinosaurs. Full Meta Jack Rick plays with Metafiction again, this time bringing Rick face to face with the idea that he is a character. A Rick in King Mortar's Mort plays with Arthurian legend. The season finale, Rictional Mortpoon's Rickmas Mortcation, brings the wider Rick Prime arc back to the foreground and sets up the 7th season's central confrontation. By the time the 7th season arrives, the show has consolidated. Most of the big institutions of the multiverse are gone. The Council is dead, the Citadel is destroyed, the Federation is reduced, the Curve has been breached. Rick Prime is the last large antagonist left. The 7th season takes its time about him. It does not rush, it builds. It gives us episodes about other things, including how Poopy got his poop back, in which Mr. Poopy Butthole is at the center of a kind of male friendship comedy. It gives us the Jarek Trap, in which Rick and Jerry swap bodies. It gives us Air Force Wong, which contains the President of the United States subplot already mentioned. It gives us That's a Mort, an episode about pasta sauce that the show plays with body horror in a way that the audience finds particularly unsettling. Then it gives us Unmortricken, which is the Rick Prime confrontation. Rick spends the episode hunting Prime. He catches him almost, he loses him almost. Eventually, with the help of an Evil Morty cameo that the show plays with the surgical precision of a much more mature serial, Rick gets his hands on Rick Prime. He kills him. It is brutal. It is anticlimactic. It is short. And Rick is left, at the end of the episode, with nothing to chase anymore. The thing he has organized his whole adult life around has been completed in a single afternoon. The rest of the 7th season has to figure out what a Rick is without the hunt. It is, in many ways, the most emotionally complex stretch of the show. The 7th season finale, an episode called Fear No Mort, is one of the show's most psychologically inward episodes. Morty is trapped in a kind of psychological scenario that uses his actual fears against him, and the episode becomes a careful character study of who Morty is when the multiverse is not pressing on him. He is sad. He is more competent than he tends to show. He is, at heart, a teenager who has spent many years carrying experiences no teenager should have. The episode treats him gently, the show does too. It is in some ways a kind of soft farewell to the early version of Morty, the screaming, anxious, easily flustered Morty, and an introduction of a more interior version, one who has lived with the multiverse for long enough that he can sit with himself in the quiet. The 8th season has the show in a slightly different posture. The Rick Prime story now resolved, the Citadel arc closed, the Evil Morty out of the curve and out of the immediate plot, the family more or less stabilized in its strange double Beth configuration, the friendships partially repaired, and the larger question of what the multiverse is for taking on a different quality. It is no longer the same show as the one we started with. It cannot be. Almost everything that made the early show feel infinite has been either resolved or rendered finite. The curve has a boundary. The Mortys can leave. The Federation is small. The Council is gone. The originals are missing. The show is left to ask what is interesting about a multiverse, once you know its shape. There are a handful of characters from the early seasons whose stories deserve careful walking through, because they form part of the texture of who Rick is, even when he is not directly being talked about. Unity is the first of them. Unity is introduced in the second season episode Autoerotic Assimilation, and is, in the show's typical sleight of hand, both one of the funniest and one of the saddest things in the entire run. Unity is a hive mind. It assimilates planets. It speaks through every body it inhabits. It is, when Rick meets it, the empress of a small planet, and when Rick and Unity reunite, the episode plays the relationship as a kind of cosmic ex-partner romance. Unity and Rick spend the day together. They have what would, in another show, be a romantic interlude, except that Rick is in bed with thousands of bodies at once. The dynamic is unsettling and hilarious in equal measure. What makes the episode important to the wider show is that Unity is, by some distance, the partner who comes closest to understanding Rick in his own terms. Unity is also a kind of god. Unity also has the capacity to leave timelines behind. Unity also has problems with attachment. When Unity, at the end of the episode, leaves Rick a letter explaining that they cannot be together because Rick brings out the worst in them, that they have decided to stay away from him for their own moral health, the letter is one of the most direct and adult breakups in the show's run. The episode ends with Rick alone in a basement attempting suicide. The camera holds on him, he passes out, the credits roll. The show does not comment further. That ending is, in many ways, the moment where the audience first realized that Rick is not having fun. The man we have been watching as a kind of trickster genius is, in his quiet moments, in serious despair. The multiverse, with all its possibilities, has not been a playground for him. It has been a way of running. Unity, who has the same problem, is the only person in any reality who has ever told him directly that the running is the problem, that the running is making him worse. The episode is short. The implications run through the rest of the series. Squanchy, who has been mentioned in passing already, deserves a return as well. Squanchy is a cat-sized alien friend of Rick's, introduced in the first season. He uses the word squanch as a placeholder for any verb, and the comic energy of the character is partly that you never know which verb he means. Squanchy is also, importantly, a soldier. He fought alongside Rick and Birdperson in the war that is referenced again and again in the show's background. He is one of the few people who survived that war. When the family flees Earth in the second season finale, Squanchy is at the wedding. When the Federation arrives, Squanchy stays behind to fight a kind of last stand. He is presumed dead. He turns up alive later in the run, scarred, older, sadder. He is still squanching. The war Rick fought before the show begins is one of the show's longest-running pieces of background lore. We do not get a detailed history of it. We do not get a name. We do not get a clear sense of who the enemy was. What we get is fragments. There was a war. Rick was in it. Birdperson was in it. Squanchy was in it. Other figures we briefly meet were in it. The war was against, in some sense, the Federation or its predecessor, or some other large institutional power that is now folded into the Federation. The war ended, Rick walked away from it, Birdperson kept the faith, Squanchy went underground. The show, by leaving the details vague, allows the war to function as a kind of psychological background for Rick. He fought, he lost, he still drinks. There is an interpretive line, very common among fans, that reads Rick's nihilism as a kind of post-war condition. He was a soldier. He saw something during the war that broke his ability to take ideology seriously. He came home, or to a home, and he could not invest in anything. The death of his family, attributed to Rick Prime, is the second hammer blow that finishes whatever the war started. By the time we meet him in the first season, he is a man with two enormous traumas already behind him, and he is using the multiverse to keep moving so that neither of them catch up to him. The show again does not insist on this reading, but the pieces fit. The man we meet in the pilot is a man who has already lived several lives, and we are only getting to know him at the start of the one where he is trying, badly, to be a grandfather. Beth's relationship with her father is, in the long run, the show's most emotionally important relationship because Beth is the closest thing to a person Rick is trying to be honest with. The two of them spend years circling each other. Beth wants to be loved. Rick wants to be left alone. Beth wants to know if she is special. Rick wants her not to need him. The show, with surprising patience, gives them moment after moment of partial honesty. The third season episode, The ABCs of Beth, in which Beth confronts Rick about her childhood, is one of the most quietly devastating things the show has done. Beth confesses in that episode that she always suspected she might be a kind of monster. Rick confirms in his way that she has always been, that this is part of why he respects her, that this is also part of why he abandoned her. The episode ends with Beth being given the option to be cloned and sent off into the universe. The choice she makes in that moment is the one that becomes the entire 4th season arc. The fact that Beth ends up doubled is, in one reading, the show's most accurate description of what it is to be a child of Rick. To be Rick's daughter is to never quite know which version of yourself is yours. You could leave, you could stay. You could be the woman in the kitchen or the woman in the spaceship. You could be your mother, you could be him. The doubling is just a literal version of the psychological state. By splitting Beth into two, the show gives her the only ending that could ever be both true, the ending where she did both things. The original Beth, the one Rick lost, is the secret center of the entire show. We see her only briefly, in flashes as a child. We see her drawing, we see her in the kitchen, we see her in the explosion. We do not get her name spoken many times. She is the absent point around which Rick orbits, and the home Beth, and the space Beth, and the Beth from the dimension we live in, are all, in some sense, attempts to fill the space the original left. Rick, in his more candid moments in later seasons, has admitted that the home Beth is not his Beth, that he has been treating her as a substitute, and that he has been doing it badly. The admission is not enough to undo decades of damage. It is, however, the first time a Rick of any dimension has said it. Hidden in this, there is one of the show's most unusual time loops, although the show keeps it implied rather than spelled out. As far as fans have pieced it together, Rick lost his original Beth as a child. He hopped dimensions for years. He found one in which an alternate Rick had also lost his family but had then died. He took that Rick's place. The Beth in that house was a child, around the age his Beth was when she was killed. He raised her. The wider pattern fans have read out of this is that Rick has been hopping into substitute fatherhoods for as long as he has had a portal gun, home Beth being one of many. The show does not press the reading, it does not even confirm it, but the strands are there, and they hum behind a lot of his quieter moments. This is the kind of thing the show buries in details that fly past the audience. There is a moment in the 3rd season finale where Rick says, in a Federation interrogation, that he has done this before. There is a moment in Solarix where the implication is reinforced, and by the 7th season, the larger pattern is allowed to sit visible at the edges of the frame without ever being stated as fact. Jerry, who deserves more attention than the show usually gives him, is a character whose multiverse story is more interesting than most viewers notice. Jerry, in his original dimension, the one Solarix returns him to, has a family that did not get destroyed. He is loved, he has a Beth there, he has a Summer and a Morty. They are pleased to see him when he turns up. They have not been replaced. The implication, which Solarix does not push hard, is that there is a dimension in which Jerry got the version of his life he kept failing to have, where he was a real father and a real husband, where Rick did not destroy his marriage. That dimension exists. Jerry walked back into it briefly. He chose to come home to the family that has been disappointed in him for years. He chose the harder life. That choice deserves to be taken seriously. Jerry is, throughout the show, mostly played as a kind of joke. He is the simple husband. He is the bad father. He is the man who cannot understand the multiverse and would not survive in it alone. But he is also the man who, given the option to live in a dimension where his life worked, chose to come back to the dimension where it did not. There is a kind of stubborn loyalty in Jerry that the show pretends to mock but actually respects. He is, in the end, the only member of the household who has actively chosen this household over another version of it. Rick chose it. Morty was dragged into it. Beth was born into it. Jerry is the only one who looked at an alternative and turned it down. There is a small ecosystem of recurring objects and substances and economic facts in the multiverse that are worth pulling together, because the show, for all its chaos, has built a remarkably consistent set of rules around them. The first is the portal gun itself. The portal gun is the device that runs the whole show. Rick can use it to open a doorway from one reality to another. The fluid that powers it, a glowing green liquid, has its own backstory, which the Citadel arc unfolded in horror. The fluid is not exotic chemistry. In the Citadel's version of events, it is made of the bodies of Mortys. The factory that produces it processes them, breaks them down, and ships the resulting goo out as the energy source of the multiverse. The implication is that Rick's adventures all the way through have been fueled by a kind of biological harvest. Every portal you have ever seen open required, somewhere up the chain, a Morty. The show drops this revelation in a subplot in the Ricklantis mix-up and never asks the audience to dwell on it. But it is there. It sits, in retrospect, under every portal that has ever opened. The second is the currency. There is, in Rick's universe, a currency called the Schmeckel. It is mentioned in the first season and appears throughout the run. Rick handles it the way he handles every other money. He has too much. He has too little. He throws it around. He gambles. The Schmeckel is, in a way, a piece of comedic world building, but it also implies an economy. There are markets, there are casinos, there are dealers, there are buyers. There is even a black market for human organs, introduced in the first season episode that gives us Krombopulos Michael. The economy of the multiverse is rough, criminal, and clearly older than Rick. He participates in it. He does not run it. There are forces in the multiverse that handle money that he cannot easily affect, which is, for him, a rare humility. The third is concentrated dark matter, a substance Rick can produce that powers his spaceship and, when needed, his weapons. The substance is, in his telling, the most valuable thing in the universe. He sells it. He hoards it. He uses it as bribery. He has, in some episodes, deals based on it. The substance is the show's quiet acknowledgement that even a genius needs to make a living, that even Rick has to barter for the things he cannot freely make. The detail is small but real. He is not omnipotent. He is rich. There is a difference. The fourth is the microverse, introduced in the second season episode The Ricks Must Be Crazy. Rick has built inside his spaceship's battery a miniature universe, whose inhabitants generate the electricity that powers the car. The inhabitants do not know they are being used. They believe they are inventing a new clean energy source. When Rick visits them, they treat him as a god. The implications spiral. The microverse contains a scientist who builds his own mini-universe. The mini-universe contains a scientist who builds his own teeny universe. The structure goes down, presumably forever. There is a kind of recursive horror in the joke, and the joke is also the show's most direct admission about how Rick uses other realities. He treats them as fuel sources. He treats their inhabitants as labor. The microverse is one of his most explicit acts of slavery, although the show does not call it that. The fifth is time. Time in Rick and Morty is not a single continuous flow. It is something that can be paused, branched, looped, frozen, and reset. The second season premiere, A Wrinkle in Time, is the show's clearest demonstration of this. Rick, Morty, and Summer froze time at the end of the first season to clean up a party. The freeze comes apart at the start of the second season. The episode then splits into parallel timelines based on small decisions. By the end of the episode, there are dozens of versions of the scene all running at once, and Rick has to collapse them back into one. The episode is one of the show's most technically ambitious. It also establishes a rule that the show keeps applying. Time in this universe branches. When you make a choice, you do not just make it. You also do not make it. In some other branch, the unmade choice is now the made one. This rule is what underpins the entire multiverse logic. The multiverse, in Rick and Morty, is not a fixed shelf of pre-existing universes. It is a constantly branching tree, where every moment of choice causes a split. Every reality the show visits is a particular path through that tree. When Rick is doing his usual run of adventures, he is moving across paths the way somebody might move across rooms in a building. The curve, the institutional fence around the part of the tree where Rick is the smartest, is itself a kind of arbitrary slice of the larger garden. This means, importantly, that the multiverse is not a static thing. It is something that is being generated constantly by the choices people make. Each time anyone in the show decides anything, the universe forks. The audience never sees most of these forks. They happen off-screen. They are presumed to be ongoing. The reason this matters for the show's emotional logic is that every choice the characters make is in some sense undone elsewhere. Morty's small acts of courage are undone elsewhere by other Mortys who failed them. Beth's choice to stay with Jerry is undone elsewhere by other Beths who left. Rick's choice to live with his fake family is undone elsewhere by other Ricks who walked away. The whole show is, in this sense, the story of a tree that keeps growing in directions the cameras cannot follow. Get Swifty, the fifth episode of the second season, is also worth bringing into this part of the conversation. because it is the show's most direct joke about the cosmic forces that affect the multiverse. Giant heads called the Cromulons appear in the sky. They demand entertainment from Earth. The Earth, in panic, decides that Rick and Morty must perform a song. The song they produce, Get Swifty itself, is, in the world of the show, both an artistic accomplishment and a survival mechanism. The Cromulons are placated, the Earth is saved, but the implication that there are beings in the multiverse who can demand performances from entire planets on threat of destruction is the kind of background fact the show drops without circling back to. The multiverse is full of audiences, the multiverse is full of judges. The multiverse is full of things that want you to entertain them or die. Big Trouble in Little Sanchez in the second season gives us Tiny Rick, the episode in which Rick puts his consciousness into a teenage body and almost loses it there. The episode plays as a comedy, but its center is dark. Tiny Rick, the teen body, is happier than the original. He has friends, he likes music, he likes the sun. The original Rick, in a series of horrifying interventions, has to be coaxed out by Summer and Morty, because the teen body is in danger of taking over the personality. The episode is about Rick's relationship with the version of himself who could have been happy. He does not want to be that version. That version is, in his mind, a failure. He retreats into the old body, into the alcoholism, into the contempt. The teen body, killed off at the end of the episode, is one of the multiverse's quiet little graves. The Wedding Squanchers, mentioned earlier, also contains a small but specific piece of multiverse mechanics that is worth lingering on. After the family flees Earth and the Federation, they look for a new planet to settle on. They visit several. Each one has a problem. There is a planet where the gravity is wrong. There is a planet where the air is poisonous. There is a planet where they would be giants. There is a planet where they would be invisible. The implication is that the multiverse has, somewhere out there, infinite homes, and that almost none of them are suitable for a family of 4. The right home is incredibly rare. The right home, in fact, is the one they came from. The episode ends with Rick choosing to give himself up rather than accept a wrong home. It is, for all his nihilism, a quietly sentimental choice. He cannot stand to see his family adjust to less. Lawnmower Dog, the second episode of the first season, is an early piece of world building that the show does not return to very often, but which contains a kind of foundational joke about how Rick treats other minds. Rick boosts Snowball, the family dog, into intelligence. Snowball, now thinking, immediately understands the unfairness of his situation. He gathers other dogs. He stages a small uprising. Rick, instead of crushing the uprising, simply opens a portal to a dimension that is naturally dog-dominated, where dogs are the rulers and humans are the pets. He sends Snowball and his followers there. Everybody, in his view, wins. The dogs get the world they deserve. The humans get the world they had. The implication is that, with infinite dimensions to choose from, no moral problem requires a moral solution. You can just move the problem somewhere. It is not a problem. This is, in many ways, the show's most distilled version of Rick's ethics. Snowball reappears briefly in later seasons. He is now an emperor on the dog planet. He is older, more grizzled, more philosophical. He treats his time in the suburbs as a kind of formative trauma. He treats Morty, who is the only Smith he was particularly attached to, with a kind of distant affection. The reunion is brief. The implication is that there are dozens of these old characters scattered across the multiverse, living their lives in dimensions Rick opened for them and then forgot about. The multiverse in this reading is also a kind of dumping ground for problems Rick did not want to solve properly. He just relocates them. The cat in Claw and Hoarder in the 4th season is part of this same theme. The cat can talk. The cat says it has done things, terrible things, that it does not want to remember. Rick refuses to find out what they are. The episode ends with Rick and Morty using a memory eraser on themselves to forget the cat's confession. The implication is that some truths in the multiverse are so unpleasant that even Rick, who claims to value honesty, will choose ignorance. The episode never tells the audience the secret either. The audience is asked to live with not knowing, the way the characters do. It is one of the show's strangest, most quietly philosophical pieces of writing. The multiverse is full of things you do not want to know. The kindest thing Rick can do is not tell you. Memory itself, as a topic, is one of the show's most consistent obsessions. The 4th season episode, Morty's Mind Blowers, is built around the idea that Rick keeps every memory Morty wants to be rid of in a wall of vials in a hidden room. Each vial is an adventure Morty asked to forget. things that were too horrifying or too painful or too embarrassing to live with. The room is enormous, the wall is full. The implication is that the version of Morty we have been watching is a version with most of his trauma surgically removed, and that the original archive of who he actually is, complete with every bad thing he has seen, is sitting in a storage room in his grandfather's house. He is, in some ways, a redacted person. The show plays with this in moments through the rest of its run. There are episodes where Morty briefly remembers something that should not have been remembered. There are episodes where his behavior seems to shift in a way that the audience can read as a memory leaking back through. The show's longest-running joke about identity is that Morty, the boy we know, is a curated version of himself. Memory Rick, the character who lives inside Rick's mind in that same episode, is one of the strangest creations in the show. He is a Rick who exists only inside Rick. He has been there for years, managing the memory storage, dressing in a kind of janitorial outfit, treating his job with quiet dignity. He is, in some sense, an internal Rick that the external Rick does not directly acknowledge. The implication is that Rick's mind is itself a kind of small dimension, with its own population, its own staff. The implication is that even Rick is not one person, he is a household. There is a Rick in the body who is in charge. There is a Rick in the memory who is the archivist. There is, presumably, a Rick somewhere who handles the drinking, a Rick who handles the science, a Rick who handles the grief. The multiverse in this reading is not just external, it is also internal. Rick contains other Ricks. Every consciousness in this show's universe is a little multiverse of its own. Doofus Rick deserves a moment of his own. Because of all the alternate Ricks, he is the one who matters most to the show's emotional argument. Doofus Rick is introduced in the first season in the Council of Ricks episode. He is, as his name suggests, the laughingstock of the other Ricks. He is sweeter than they are. He is friendlier. He is interested in Jerry. He likes Jerry. He becomes Jerry's friend. The other Ricks shun him for it. Doofus Rick spends the episode being befriended by Jerry while our Rick rolls his eyes at the whole arrangement. The implication, never quite spelled out, is that Doofus Rick has, in his own way, solved the problem the other Ricks could not solve. He has chosen to be nice. He has chosen to value the people around him. He has chosen to be Jerry's friend, not because Jerry is interesting, but because Jerry is there. Doofus Rick is one of the most quietly subversive characters in the show. He proves, by his existence, that there are dimensions in which Rick is a kind, simple person. The curve does not exclude these Ricks. They are inside the boundary. They are part of the supply. They just are not the dominant type. The dominant type, the type we know, is the cynical, drunk, brilliant version. But there are Ricks who are softer. There are Ricks who are kinder. There are Ricks who would never have left their families. There are Ricks who do not drink. There are Ricks, presumably, who never built portal guns at all because they decided that the multiverse was not their problem to solve. Doofus Rick is the visible tip of that iceberg. He is the proof that Rick had options. The man we are watching chose to be the man he is. There is also an implicit story about the Mortys who got better Ricks. We do not see most of them, we do not visit their lives, but by the logic of the show, they must exist. There must be Mortys somewhere in the curve who have a Doofus Rick for a grandfather, who get tucked in at night, who get their homework helped with, who do not have buried bodies in their backyards. The show, for whatever reason, does not visit them often, perhaps because they are not dramatic enough, perhaps because they would make the audience too sad about the boy we know. The implication is there, though. Our Morty is the Morty of a particular kind of Rick. Another Rick would have produced another Morty. The Morty we have is the consequence of the Rick we have. This is part of why the relationship between Rick and Morty is, in the long arc of the show, more complicated than it first appears. In the early seasons, the dynamic is simple. Rick is the dragger. Morty is the dragged. Rick has the adventures. Morty has the trauma. By the middle seasons, the dynamic has shifted. Morty starts to use the adventures for his own purposes. Morty starts to be the one with strong feelings. Morty starts to push back. By the later seasons, the dynamic has shifted again. Morty has, in some ways, surpassed Rick in emotional maturity. Morty is the one who insists on processing things. Morty is the one who calls Rick on his bullshit. Rick, by the 7th season, is the one being managed by his grandson. There is, in particular, a beat in the 7th season finale, Fear No Mort, that captures this shift. Morty, faced with his deepest fears, accepts them and survives. Rick, faced with his deepest fear, which is being needed, behaves like a child. The episode does not say it directly, but it lays out the inversion. The man who used to be the strong one is now the one who has to be carried. The boy who used to be the weak one is now the one who carries him. The household, after 7 seasons, has reorganized itself, and Morty, against all the original odds, has become a kind of moral center. Not because he is wise, not because he is good, but because he has learned over time how to keep showing up. The thematic argument of the show, taken as a whole, has by this point become clear, although the show is too restless to state it directly. The multiverse in Rick and Morty is not a celebration of possibility. It is a meditation on what happens when possibility becomes too much. The show begins by treating infinity as freedom. It ends by treating infinity as exhausting. The Ricks built the curve because infinity was too big to live in. Evil Morty broke the curve because the curve was too small to live in. The household keeps the dinner table because the dinner table is the only piece of geometry small enough to actually live at. This is one of the show's most adult positions. It is suggesting, against the easy reading of the multiverse, that human scale matters. That the answer to too many universes is not more universes. The answer is one table. With these particular people at it, no matter how broken the biology is, no matter how many decoys have been killed in the backyard, no matter how many Mortys have been turned into goo, no matter how many Beths have been doubled, the table is the unit, the household is the unit. The fenced garden is too big, the curve is too big, the multiverse is too big, the dinner table is exactly the right size. Running through the show, there is also a quiet argument about science and ethics that the multiverse is the perfect engine for. Rick is, by every measure, the smartest being inside the curve. He can do anything. He can build anything. He can fix anything. What we have seen him do across 7 seasons of opportunity is not very impressive on the moral ledger. He has saved a small number of lives. He has destroyed a much larger number. He has wrecked civilizations. He has used Mortys as fuel. He has used Jerrys as daycare attendees. He has used Beths as substitutes for his lost daughter. He has used the universe as a sandbox. He has produced, at the end of all of it, no great discovery, no great institution, no great change. He has, by his own admission, in many quieter moments, mostly produced grief, alcoholism, and a small group of people he loves and cannot say it to. The show is, in this sense, skeptical of genius. It is suggesting that intelligence, in the absence of grief management, is not enough to make a person useful. It is suggesting that the smartest being in the universe is, if he cannot face what happened to his wife, just a more efficient version of himself running away. The curve, the institution, the Citadel, the council, all of these are extensions of Rick's intelligence. None of them are extensions of his wisdom. He has very little of that. The wisdom in the show is mostly held by the secondary characters, by Birdperson, by Unity, by Morty in his quieter moments, by Beth in her honesty, by Jerry in his stubborn affection. Rick is the engine. The others are the moral. There is an interpretation of the show's whole multiverse architecture as a kind of long apology to Diane. Every dimension Rick has visited is one in which he was looking for the version of himself who killed her. Every choice he has made is a way of avoiding the choice of going home and grieving. Every Beth he has stood in for is a way of staying close to the daughter he lost. The curve, in this reading, is one giant search algorithm. The Citadel is a collateral institution. The Council is an accident. The Federation is a distraction. The real work has always been the hunt. Now that the hunt is over, with Rick Prime dead, what is left is the apology Rick has not made, the grief he has not done, the conversation he has never had with himself about who he is when he stops running. The show, after Unmortricken, is in the unusual position of asking what kind of show it wants to be when its main character no longer has a quest. Most shows do not get to ask this question because most shows end before they have to. Rick and Morty, perhaps because of how long it has been on the air, perhaps because of how patient its showrunners have been, has earned the right to keep going past the end of its central villain. The answer, as far as we can tell, is that the show wants to be a quieter family drama with occasional cosmic interludes. It wants to be about the dinner table. It wants to use the multiverse only when it has to. It wants to spend more time on Morty's interior, on Beth's relationships, on Summer's small revolutions, on Jerry's quiet loyalty. It wants to take the household finally seriously. That is, in many ways, a strange endpoint for a show that began as a science fiction parody about a drunk grandfather. But it is also, when you look back, the only endpoint the show could have honestly arrived at. The multiverse was a way of looking at the family. The family was always the point. The curve was a fence, and the dinner table was, all along, where the show actually lived. One last piece of the multiverse is worth talking about before the close because the show in its later seasons has been hinting at it without naming it. That is the question of what is outside the curve. Evil Morty went there, he stepped across, he did not come back. We do not know what he found. The show has not told us. There are theories, there are speculations, none of them are confirmed. The honest answer is that we do not know what is outside the curve, and that the show has been content to leave the question hanging. It is one of the great open mysteries of the run, and it is a mystery that the show may never close. It may not be the point. What is interesting, though, is the possibility space that the question opens up. If the curve contains only the universes where Rick is the smartest, then the universes outside the curve contain everything else. They contain universes where Morty is the smartest being. They contain universes where Jerry is the smartest being. They contain universes where the smartest being is a creature we have not been introduced to. They contain universes where intelligence does not work the way it does in our curve. They contain universes where the rules of cause and effect run differently. And somewhere in there, presumably, is the universe Evil Morty wanted to go to, the one without Ricks, the one where a Morty can be a person. The audience for now is left to imagine what kind of life he is having. Maybe he is happy. Maybe he is bored. Maybe he is alone. Maybe he is building something. Maybe he is sitting somewhere we have not seen, looking up at stars he does not recognize finally for the first time in his life, not waiting for a grandfather to walk in and ruin the moment. The show, in not following him, has given him a kind of dignity it has given to nobody else. It has let him go. That, more than anything else the show has done, is the multiverse's most generous gesture, to let a character be free of itself. There is a category of episodes about simulation that fits oddly into the multiverse architecture because the show treats simulations differently from dimensions. A simulation, in the show's logic, is a constructed environment intended to fool somebody. A dimension is a real, naturally occurring branch of the tree. The simulations in the show are mostly the work of the Zagarians, the alien conmen who first appear in the first season episode M. Night Shyamalan Aliens. The Zagarians trap Rick in a simulation, then a simulation inside a simulation, then a simulation inside that, trying to extract his concentrated dark matter formula. Rick is of course ahead of them. He has known he is in a simulation since the beginning of the episode. He plays along to humiliate them. By the end of the episode, the Zagarians are bankrupt, their leader is dead, and the joke is that they should never have tried to scam the smartest being in the universe. But the simulations are interesting for their own sake, because they tell us something about what Rick believes about reality. He treats the simulations and the real dimensions as functionally equivalent. He is rude in both. He kills people in both. He drinks in both. The implication is that to him, a simulated environment is not meaningfully different from a real one. If you cannot tell, it does not matter. This is, in some ways, the most chilling thing about Rick. He has stopped distinguishing between worlds where his actions have consequences and worlds where they do not, because from his perspective, no world has the consequences anyway. They are all simulations of a kind. He is the only character in any of them. The Zagarians appear again in later episodes in smaller ways. Their existence is part of the texture of the multiverse. There is a class of con artists in this universe whose entire business model is selling fake dimensions to people who do not check carefully. Rick checks. Most of the rest of the multiverse apparently does not. The implication, which the show drops without circling back to, is that some unknown percentage of the multiverse is fake, manufactured by the Zagarians or by entities like them, occupied by people who do not know they are inside a sales pitch. The audience is left to wonder in moments whether the Earth they are watching is one of those manufactured ones. The show never confirms it either way. The doubt sits, quietly, in the architecture. The third season's rest and relaxation gives us Toxic Rick, who deserves more attention than he sometimes gets. The episode begins with Rick and Morty going to a kind of spa designed to remove all the toxic parts of a person. The procedure works. Rick comes out healthy, kind, sentimental, even mildly competent at being a grandfather. Morty comes out confident, popular, and obnoxiously self-assured. The toxic parts of both of them, the parts the spa removed, do not simply disappear. They are pulled out into a separate space, where they coalesce into Toxic Rick and Toxic Morty. These toxic versions are not removed from existence. They are dropped into another dimension where they live as exiles. They are angry. They want back in. The episode plays out as a quiet horror in which the healthy Rick and Morty find themselves unable to function in the real world because their healthy versions are, frankly, less effective. The kind Rick is too tender to keep up with the multiverse's demands. The confident Morty is too pleased with himself to listen to advice. They both, in the end, decide to reabsorb their toxic counterparts. They go back to being the people they were. The show is, in this episode, making one of its most pointed jokes about therapy. The argument the episode is running is that the worst parts of a person are not separate from their function. They are intertwined with their competence. Take away Rick's bitterness and you take away his focus. Take away Morty's anxiety and you take away his moral seriousness. They cannot live without their flaws. The flaws are the structure. This is a strange position for a show to take, and the writers know it. The episode is not arguing that therapy is bad. It is arguing that the particular characters at the center of the show have organized themselves around their wounds, and that to remove the wounds would be to remove the people. This is, in many ways, the show's most direct statement about Rick. He is not, in fact, a man who could be fixed. He is a man whose existence depends on not being fixed. The grief is the fuel. The grief is the brain. Take away the grief and you have doofus Rick. The show, with characteristic honesty, says it would prefer the grief. The Old Man and the Seat in the 4th season is one of the show's quietest episodes and one of its most moving. The premise is that Rick has for years kept a secret. He has a private bathroom on a remote alien planet where he goes to defecate in absolute solitude. Nobody else has ever sat on his toilet. The episode begins when somebody does. Rick is, against all his usual cynicism, devastated. He sets out to find the perpetrator. He finds him. He kills him, or at least he tries to. The episode escalates into a series of revelations about how Rick chooses his attachments. He has, in this case, organized an entire planet around being alone for a few minutes a day. The Seat is, in some ways, the only place in the multiverse where he is at peace. What makes the episode quietly important is that Rick eventually finds a friend in the perpetrator, an old alien man with his own grief, who has been using Rick's toilet as a way to be near somebody else. The two of them, by the end of the episode, are something close to friends. Then, in a turn that the show executes with brutal speed, Rick betrays the man, kills him with a cruel trick, and the friendship is over. The episode is, on the surface, a kind of cosmic prank. Underneath it is a portrait of Rick's inability to let any friendship survive the moment it threatens to become real. He has done this many times. He will do it again. The Old Man and the Seat is just the version of the joke we get to watch in full. Rattlestar Galactica in the same season is a short, beautiful piece of world building about a civilization of snakes that develops space travel, and then time travel, and then eventually their own apocalypse. The episode runs through the entire history of the snake civilization, generation by generation, in a tight sequence, and it functions as a kind of joke about how much narrative the show can pack into a few minutes. It is also, in its quieter moments, a meditation on how civilizations rise and fall. The snakes invent things. They go to war. They make peace. They invent time travel. They go back to undo their wars. They make a paradox. They erase themselves. The episode is, in microcosm, the story of every civilization in the multiverse. They come up. They invent something dangerous. They use it. They are gone. The show has been telling this story over and over again. The snakes just got it told quickly. A category of episode that the show uses to refresh itself is the bottle episode. Pickle Rick is one. The Vat of Acid episode is one. Solarix is in its own way one. Bottle episodes in Rick and Morty tend to be the episodes that do the most for character development, because the show is forced to slow down and look at what its people are actually like when there is no spectacle to hide behind. Pickle Rick is about a man refusing to do family therapy. The Vat of Acid episode is about a teenager learning the difference between a save state and a life. Solarix is about 3 men forced to acknowledge that the homes they live in are not the homes they came from. The bottle episodes, taken as a series, are the show's secret spine. They are the moments where the multiverse stops moving and you can see who the characters are when the cameras stop pointing somewhere weird. The animation of the show, while not the topic of this essay, is worth a quick mention, because it has been instrumental in selling the multiverse. The art style began as a kind of bouncy, jagged late 90s throwback, and over the seasons it has refined and expanded into something with serious ambition. The Citadel is rendered with a specificity that earlier episodes did not have. The interior of Birdperson's mind and Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort is one of the most beautiful pieces of animation in television. The opening sequences of multiple seasons have done significant world-building work in the form of small visual gags. The show has always been visually inventive. Over time, it has gotten better. The multiverse, in the later seasons, looks like a place. The early seasons looked like a doodle of one. Both are valid, both serve the show's mood. The music of the show, also not the topic of this essay, is worth a brief acknowledgement because the orchestral scoring in the later seasons has done a lot to give the multiverse weight. The recurring theme that plays under Evil Morty's appearances is, by now, one of the most recognizable pieces of music in modern television animation. The use of For the Damaged Coda, the piece by Blonde Redhead that scores some of Evil Morty's biggest moments, has crossed over into a cultural shorthand for menace in itself. The Citadel arc, the Rick Prime arc, and the recent Birdperson episode all benefit from a score that takes the material seriously, even when the script is making jokes about pickled vegetables. The music tells you again and again that the multiverse is a sad place, even when the dialogue is pretending otherwise. Coming back to the question of what holds all of this together, the answer the show has arrived at, slowly, across 7 seasons, is that what holds the multiverse together is attention. The multiverse is not held together by physics. It is not held together by institutions. It is not held together by the curve. It is held together by the small, repeated act of paying attention to particular people again and again until they become real. The dinner table is real because we have watched it for hundreds of hours. The Beth at the kitchen sink is real because we have watched her, in dozens of variations, behave like Beth. The Morty in the back seat is real because we have watched his face for so long that we know which silences he is doing on purpose. The multiverse, in the show's logic, is the inventory. The household is the part that gets watched. This is, in the end, a generous philosophy for a show as cynical as Rick and Morty to land on. It is suggesting that even in a universe of infinite branches, the act of paying attention to one branch is what makes that branch matter. The other branches exist. They keep happening. They keep producing other Beths, other Mortys, other Ricks, other dinners. But the branches we have been on with these particular people are real because we and the show have chosen to be there with them. The choice to keep watching is, in a strange way, the same choice the household makes. They keep showing up. We keep showing up. The multiverse is the part outside. The household is the part where the camera stays. A piece of the multiverse story lives mostly in the fan community, and the show itself has had a curious and sometimes hostile relationship with it. And that is the role of fan theory. From the second season onwards, Rick and Morty was treated by a portion of its audience as a kind of puzzle box. The Evil Morty teases, the council, the hints about Rick's wife, the recurring symbols all became the basis of long video essays, forum threads, wiki articles, and intense argument. The show watched this happen. The show for a long time played with it. The show occasionally mocked it in moments that seemed designed to push back against the assumption that everything was a clue. The 7th season has in some episodes mocked the very mode of fan theory making, including in That's a Morte and in Full Meta Jack Rick, both of which contain moments where Rick, or the narrative itself, comments on the audience's appetite for hidden meaning. The show's position, taken in aggregate, is that fan theory is part of what made the show what it is, but that the show also reserves the right to refuse to fulfill the audience's expectations. This is, in itself, a kind of multiverse logic. The fan theories are themselves a kind of multiverse. Each theory is a possible version of the show. Each interpretation is a possible direction the writers could go in. The actual version of the show is one path through that imagined garden, and many of the paths the audience expected were not taken. The Evil Morty origin story is different from what most fans guessed. The Rick Prime confrontation is shorter and less mythological than the build-up suggested. The fate of the Citadel is more sudden than the fan community expected. The show, in each case, has refused to give the audience the story they were anticipating, while still giving them a story. There is a reading of the show, often advanced by fans, that suggests Rick has been telling the story all along, that the show itself is a narrative he is constructing or recounting. This reading is mostly speculative, although the show has flirted with the idea in episodes like Never Ricking Morty and Full Meta Jack Rick. There is no confirmed meta-narrative in which Rick is the narrator. There is, however, a recurring sense in which the show is aware of its own form. in which characters seem to know they are inside a TV show, in which the rules of plot are sometimes weaponized against the audience. Whether this amounts to a unified theory of Rick as author, or is simply a recurring joke about the artifice of television, is up to the viewer to decide. The show, in its usual way, refuses to give a final answer. In the wider fan ecosystem, dozens of small theories about the multiverse fill in gaps the show has left open. Theories about what is outside the curve. Theories about the original Rick before the war. Theories about whether the show has had multiple unannounced Ricks at the center of it. Theories about whether the Morty we know is the same Morty across all the seasons. Theories about whether the family has been replaced more than once. Theories about whether certain episodes are simulations being run by other characters. The show, by leaving so many things open, has given the audience permission to fill in the multiverse on their own. This is, in some ways, the show's most generous gesture. It is not trying to control the audience's imagination. It is offering raw material and stepping back. The 7th season included a short list of episodes that have not been mentioned in detail yet, and they deserve at least a quick walking through because they were the most recent material in the show's run for a long stretch of its life. Wet Quat Unmortricken Summer is a small, contained episode about a wet quat festival, which is one of the show's quietly inventive bits of alien culture world building. Rise of the Numbericons is an episode about a kind of mathematical religion. Mort Ragnarok plays with Norse mythology. Each of these episodes adds a piece to the multiverse without expanding its central architecture. They are, in a sense, the show settling into being a stable comedy again after the long arc of Rick Prime is closed. The closing episode of the 7th season, Fear No Mort, has already been discussed, but it is worth returning to one last time because of how it ends. Morty, having faced his fears, sits with Rick on the porch in a moment of unusual quiet. The two of them, after everything they have done together, are still grandfather and grandson. Rick is older, Morty is older. Neither of them is what they were. The episode lets them sit together for a long beat. The score holds, the camera holds. In that quiet, there is an acknowledgement that the multiverse has done what it can to them. They have been through it, they have come out the other side, they are still on the porch, the show is still going. The 8th season takes the show into the period after the Rick Prime resolution, where the central revenge plot is no longer the engine, and the structure of the show has to be discovered freshly. There is more domestic comedy. There are more episodes about Morty and Summer trying to live their teenage lives. There are more episodes about Beth and Space Beth and Jerry adjusting to their new household configuration. The Rick at the center of the show is, by this point, a different Rick than the one we met. He has had his revenge. He is no longer hunting. He is, very slowly, learning to be at home. The multiverse, in this new phase, becomes more of a backdrop than a driver. It is where you go to find a problem of the week. It is no longer the place where the central drama lives. The central drama lives in the kitchen. That shift from a show driven by cosmic plot to a show driven by domestic life is the natural endpoint of every long-form animated series that takes itself seriously. The Simpsons did it in its slower way. Bob's Burgers did it from the start. Rick and Morty has done it backwards, starting in the cosmos and gradually narrowing down to the household. By the 8th season, the show is, in many ways, the show it was always going to be, which is a family comedy with science fiction packaging. The packaging is still beautiful, the packaging is still inventive, but the show inside it is by now a show about people at a table. It always was. The multiverse was the wrapping paper. There is a final piece of the multiverse story that deserves a moment, because it is the piece that the audience has, more than any other, taken into their own lives, and that is the show's frequent argument about how to live without meaning. Rick is, on the surface, a nihilist. He does not believe in anything. He does not respect anything. He does not value anything. He has, in many of his most quoted lines, articulated a worldview in which nothing matters because everything is replaceable. The audience has, in places, taken this argument seriously. There are fans who treat Rick as a kind of philosophical hero. There are fans who treat the show's nihilism as a guide to living. The show, in its quieter moments, has been arguing the opposite. The show has been suggesting repeatedly that the nihilism is a cover, that Rick is not actually a person who believes nothing matters, that he is a person who is haunted by how much things matter and who has built a philosophy out of pretending otherwise to keep himself functional. The evidence for this reading is overwhelming if you watch carefully. Rick cries about Diane. Rick risks his life to save Birdperson. Rick gives up his freedom to save his family at the end of the second season. Rick spends decades hunting one man to avenge a wife and a daughter. These are not the actions of a person who believes nothing matters. They are the actions of a person who believes everything matters and cannot bear it. The audience that has taken Rick's nihilism literally in this reading has missed the show's argument. The argument is not that nothing matters. The argument is that nihilism is a posture people adopt when grief has become unmanageable. The show, by giving Rick this posture, has been showing the audience what it looks like to be a person broken by loss. It has not been recommending the posture, it has been observing it, and it has been suggesting in episode after episode that the way out of the posture is the slow, unglamorous work of letting people back in, of going to family therapy, of acknowledging the daughter you have instead of the daughter you lost, of letting a granddaughter speak to you, of letting a grandson hold your hand on a porch. That is, in the end, the show's most direct moral statement, although it has refused to state it directly. The multiverse is enormous. The curve is large. The dimensions are many. The Ricks are many. The Mortys are many. The Beths are double. The Jerrys are doubled by their daycare. The multiverse is, in every sense, infinite, or large enough to feel infinite. The only response to it that does not lead to madness, the only response the show has endorsed in the end, is to choose a small, finite thing and pay attention to it. A porch, a daughter, a grandson, a friend who used to be a bird, a husband who keeps coming back, a grandmother whose hat is on the wall, a house with the lights on. This is the multiverse of Rick and Morty, as the show has shown it across its run. It is not infinite because the curve fences it. It is not free because the Council and the Citadel and the Federation are inside it. It is not safe because Rick Prime existed inside it and may, in some sense, still exist in the wider tree. It is not happy because everyone in it is grieving something. It is instead big. It is instead branching. It is instead full of versions of you that you will never meet. Inside all of that, somewhere there is a kitchen, and somebody you love is standing at the sink, and they are real because you have been watching them for a long time, and you are still watching them now. That is, in the end, what the show wanted to tell us. The infinite was never the answer. The infinite was the problem. The answer is the kitchen. If you have stayed with me this long, then thank you for letting the multiverse settle around you tonight. The show has been on the air for many years now, and it has done a lot to itself and to its audience in that time. It started as a parody of a particular kind of 1980s science fiction and became, somewhere along the way, one of the most ambitious and emotionally serious animated shows on television. It has not been a perfect show. It has been a frequently uneven one. It has had storylines that lost their way, episodes that did not land, controversies it could not avoid. But the central thing it set out to do, to take seriously the idea that infinity might be the wrong thing for a person to look at directly, it has done. And it has done it by paying long, patient attention to a small family in a small house, while telling you in the background that there are billions of other small families in other small houses, all of them just as worthy, all of them just as fragile, all of them just as alive. There are still seasons to come. There are still mysteries to be unwound. There is still the question of what is outside the curve. There is still the question of what Evil Morty is doing out there in the rest of infinity. There is still the question of what Rick will be when he is done being a hunter. There is still the question of what Morty will be when he is done being a sidekick. There is still the question of who, among the family, is the original, and the show's gentle suggestion that the question no longer matters. The multiverse keeps branching. The household keeps holding. Somewhere on a porch, a grandfather and his grandson are sitting in silence, and a piece of music is playing, and the camera is paying attention. If you have made it all the way through to this point, then you have given the show, and tonight's narration of it, the same kind of attention the show recommends. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting us walk you through the long shape of what is, in the end, one of the strangest, saddest, most ambitious cartoons ever made. Sleep well tonight, wherever your dimension is. The household will still be there in the morning. Mr. Poopy Butthole, presumably, will be in the kitchen. Rick will be in the garage. Morty will be in his room. Beth will be at the table. Space Beth will be wherever she is needed. Summer will be on her phone. Jerry will be in the doorway, just trying. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.